All right, we're going to go ahead and call our regular board meeting to order. If everyone will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Sorry, I believe we have some students that are going to come and lead us. Let's give them a hand as they come. All right. And they're from Highland Park Elementary.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Come on, let's give them another big hand. All right, I would like to take this time and welcome everyone that is present and also viewing online. Can I have an adoption of our agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Buck for a superintendent's report.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Board of Education. So I have several things I want to share. First off, major congratulations are in order for some standout swimming performances. State was last week. At the recent state championship, Lee Summit West sophomore Miller Wood placed 7th in the 50-yard freestyle. Senior Anna Lewis placed 8th in diving. And LSHS junior Angela Kim placed 4th in both the 50-yard freestyle and the 100-yard freestyle. And then last but not least, sophomore Abby Sanig earned 7th place in the 200-yard intermediate. So congratulations to those student athletes. This week we had kind of a special treat, and I know a couple board members were there too, so I'll probably say something about it later. But we had Missouri Governor Mike Parson and Missouri Commissioner of Education Margie Van Dieven. They met with the youth and government over at Lee Summit North and other JAG students from all 3 of our high schools to talk about leadership and their experience in office. And they spent an hour answering students' questions. It was fantastic. And kudos to Missouri, the entire state's youth and government governor, which is our own Lee Summit, Kylie Mead, for moderating. And Kylie is interesting because she is the first sibling of another governor. So her older sister was a governor back in the past. So it's been around for 75 years, youth and government Missouri, and it's only once has it been 2 siblings be governor, and Kylie is one of those. So congratulations. Her mom was very proud watching. Just recently, I think it was February 9th, we had FFA is back in Lee Summit. So I don't know if you know this, but Future Farmers America is what it used to be called. Now it's called FFA. Its first chapter in Missouri in 1928 was right here in Lee Summit. But we haven't had it since 1978. We can't say it anymore because we got it back. So, and what was nice about this, and there was many people from the state at that chartering ceremony, is that we had kids from all 3 of our high schools, as well as many other high schools in the area, because this is through STA at Paradise Park, so kudos to them. Also, I think I may have mentioned this last month, but I got to go to the MMBA conference, and Dr. Herzog went as well, to see 2 of our performers. So we had the combined choir at Lee Summit West. They were amazing, as well as the chamber choir. Our chamber also performed, the concert chamber. So they did a fantastic job at the MMBA conference and had lots of kudos from music teachers and band teachers from around the state, so kudos to them. Several announcements I want to make. There is an election, April 2nd. If you don't know, we're on spring break on Election Day. So if you are going to be out of town, you're going to take your spring break on the road, please know that we are putting out multiple times throughout this course between earlier this month until the Election Day, how you can do a mail-in absentee ballot if you're not going to be here. So if you want to do that, last day to register to vote, by the way, is March 6th. But requirements for mail-in ballot must be sent in by March 20th. And again, depends. We have multiple municipalities that we have to go through. We have Kansas City, we have Jackson County, and Cass County, depending on where you live. So that information is on our website, as well as being sent out social media and email-wise. So thank you to our PR department for that. It's not too late to celebrate 25 years of Lee Summit Education Foundation. This coming up on March 2nd, and I think you'll probably hear a little bit about this later from one of our board members. It's our Taste of Lee Summit, and it's always an exciting night. Join 500 of your friends, enjoy entertainment, maybe buy an item or 2. I can tell you that we're raffling off a party at Paradise Park for some individuals if you want to have a fall party and have s'mores and all kinds of fun stuff. So we're going to auction that off as a district, so and several other things. Kindergarten kickoff events are for coming up for the 2025 school year. They'll be from 5 to 6 p.m. on March 7th at all the elementary sites. So again, if you have an incoming kindergartner, 5 to 6 on March 7th at every single one of our elementary sites, so please sign up or attend. Save the date, our Lee Summit Education Foundation is doing something new this year in a big way, and it's a Student Wellbeing Summit hosted by our LSR7 Student Support Department and Lee Summit Education Foundation. Now, we've had a one-on-one kind of event for several years. This is kind of a new rebranding of student well-being. That'll be March 27th, and it'll be at Lee Summit High School from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. So March 27th, 5:30, 8:30 p.m. Last, I want to say for everyone who was impacted by the events at the end of the Chief Parade, our hearts go out to all of you. I also want to say thank you to all the first responders who were involved. And I also want to highlight that we had 2 of our SROs there. One of them is here today, and he may be in the back corner there. So Officer Arnold was serving that day on the parade route, as well as Officer Sims. So thank you, Officer Arnold, for your service. That was my report.
All right, at this time, we're going to have our first school spotlight, which is going to be 3.01 from Highland Park Elementary.
Hi, we are 5th grade students from HPE. My name is Aiden.
My name is Kyler.
My name is Lorelai. And my name is Ella.
We are here to present our Parade of Paws that we are creating at school.
Mrs. Custer and Mrs. Leonard received a PEAK grant last year from the Lee Summit Educational Foundation for the Parade of Paws, inspired by the Parade of Hearts.
The Parade of Paws represents the sense of belonging and community in our school. During art class, students have been working on the classroom paws. Each student and teacher is represented with a spot that they decorate, showing their individuality and their belonging at school.
Not only are students and teachers creating the paws, but every department is creating a paw to show belonging and their individuality. We would like to show you a mini parade.
So, I'm Mrs. Custer, the art teacher. Hello. Here are some of the paws, if you guys want to go up there, so that we can do a mini parade so you can see what we've created so far. When all are complete, they're going to go up all around the building. We have about 34 of them that will go up in front of each classroom and each department. We've brought in one from the cafe. We've brought in one from our class program. We've brought one in from 4th, 5th, and 1st grade. We wanted to thank the foundation for the PEAK grant and this opportunity to share them. We'd like to invite you to come and view them. We have an art showcase on May 7th, and you can come and see them at our art show and take a parade through the hallways. They've been working really hard on them, and they look great.
Hey, Katie, was we able to get a picture of all of those? Can we get one? Let's have the students come up if that's okay, and just let them come in and hold them.
You want them up by the dais?
Just come to the dais and face that way. Yes, and face that way.
Some parents might want a picture too.
They are.
Okay, as part of Highland Park's showcase, we also get the opportunity and the honor, Mrs. Orff, are you coming? To recognize one of our volunteers. So I would like to invite Jackie Shelp. Kleenex. Okay, when we were told that we got to recognize one volunteer on our special month when we come, without a doubt, we knew it was going to be you, Jackie. We have lots of great volunteers at Highland Park, as do all schools, but we only could pick one. So, here you go, honey. Jackie Shelp is the definition of selflessness. Her commitment to our students, staff, and families goes above and beyond. She has given countless hours to imagine, create, implement, and shop for our makerspace, and even volunteers her time, weekends, days, evenings, to plan, set up, and run the sessions for our students each month. I have no doubt many of our students think she is employed and a teacher at Highland Park. We wish she was, by the way. She gives her time not because she has to or is being paid to. Much like our Board of Education, her heart is her guide, and her time is spent making the lives of our staff and students better. Thank you, Jackie, for the amazing gift that you are to all of us. This is her last year as a Highland Park parent, and that's why she's crying. And her daughter was one of our presenters. So we will miss you so much, but you made your mark at Highland Park forever.
If the board will come down for a photo, please.
I have to take the photo.
All right, our next school spotlight is going to be from the Lee Summit High School. Dr. Harrison?
Good evening. This evening, I'd like to share with you a few members of our Flying Tigers Junior Air Force ROTC program and let them share some of the work they've been involved in this year. I am incredibly proud of this group. They have recommitted in a way. We've had a number of bumps over the last few years, again, trying to move numbers from COVID, going through some different instructors, but this program is soaring, and I'm really excited for them to share their success story with you.
Good evening. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Zellner, along with Master Sergeant Todd Holbert. We are the two instructors at Lee Summit High School. Our program is all about leadership and character development and service. So without further ado, though, I want to turn it over to the real stars of our program, which is our cadets. In particular, tonight we have three of them that exemplify our school's core values of tradition, pride, and excellence. So without further ado, Chief, you're up.
Okay. You're on the wrong slide.
Ooh, there we go.
So Lee Summit High School Air Force Junior ROTC, what makes it special is it's cadet-led and cadet-run, meaning that we have a select cadet staff that runs a lot of our administrative processes, public affairs, physical training, event planning, anything that you would think an instructor would take care of, we take care of with the help from them. And then we have a discipline advisory board that is run by the cadet staff, and it's a special board much like this one, where we take on any challenges that cadets have, like concerns about behavior or anything like that.
So recently we just had our kind of headquarters overview and I don't know what you want to call it. Basically evaluation of our entire unit. So we have been known as the Air Force Distinguished Unit four out of the last 6 years. So we are exceeding standards like there's no other. This year was our first inspection within 4 years again, from that headquarters, from the top. We had 16 exceed standards ratings out of 30, so we went above and beyond again, like in every single thing, which is spectacular out of every unit in Missouri. We clearly were evident, it was clearly that cadets were definitely running this program. That was stated by our headquarters inspector, which is, again, above and beyond, knowing that most Air Force Junior ROTC groups kind of struggle with that. So we are obviously cadet-led, cadet-run, which is our core mission. Our community service, in 2023, our community service hours was 1,650 hours. So that is averaging 30 per cadet. And obviously, as you guys know, the graduating requirements is 10 per student, which some people do struggle doing that. So going down the line, our sophomores, freshmen, junior, senior, our average is 30. And some do go above and beyond in that too. So those are kind of some of the community service events that we have done this year and that we're kind of known for. Really does get us out in our community, which is a main goal that we do have. And in the past 4 years, we've had 5,371 community service hours, totaling 74 community service events outside of our honor guards for football games. So stuff that we're truly going into our community to impact.
So our co-curricular activities, we start from like the butt crack of dawn in the morning at 6 o'clock, and sometimes it's early in the morning, and we go till about sometimes 5 o'clock at night during the early September, October times. And most weekends are also occupied through Raiders competitions, drill competitions, archery competitions, and so forth. We also have non-competitive teams like our honor guards, our awareness presentation team, all of our other activities like also cannon team and model building as well. Do you guys have any questions?
Board, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to congratulate you on your service. And I love seeing that you are pouring into your community. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
And thank you for your time.
Okay, we have 2 more comments.
I just had a comment. I wanted to thank you guys also for what you guys do and being the leaders that you are, not just for your representing the school district, but also in the community. We recently, my daughter and my son went to Lee Summit High School for the orientation, and we saw your group there, and my son was just in awe. He can't wait. So just thank you guys. You guys are really great.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Johnson.
I wanted to say thank you for your service, all the community service you've done, and I really appreciate you using butt crack dawn, because I say that too. And I don't know where it came from, but I'm not the only one who knows that I appreciate you making me feel like I belong.
Yes, normally we're about developing character, not being characters.
Is that a military term?
That's actually what I was going to say. What's the technical definition of butt crack of dawn? But I'm really glad Camille opened that door up for me, because that's what I was thinking, and I was really fighting it. I was like, don't say it. Not appropriate. So thank you.
Can you go back a couple slides? One more. One more. Yep. Nope. Nope. Right. Yep. One more. There we go. Okay, we'll try to get this back on track just a little bit. I did want to share with you the unit evaluation. The students spoke to that, but the paperwork that came back from that was just incredibly impressive. And there are a number of quotes that the students pulled out here to share with you. But I wanted to draw your attention to a particular one. I noticed they had written that one as well, even though I had pulled it out to share with you. But one of the closing statements their evaluator wrote was, "I'd also like to recognize the unwavering dedication of your Air Force JROTC instructors, Lieutenant Colonel Zellner and Master Sergeant Holbert. They are clearly invested in the leadership and character development of their cadets and are providing an unsurpassed level of mentorship and guidance on a daily basis." And so I just wanted to give a shout out to them as well, because they are truly allowing our students to embody those ideals and become leaders. And I am really, really grateful for the work that they do with our students. All right, and the second half of our school spotlight is also another recognition piece. So would the Boning family please join me? You can come too. And I would like to introduce Marjorie Boning, who thinks she's here for an award for her student, but she's not. Because we wanted to just take a minute and recognize you as Volunteer of the Year for Lee Summit High School. And she's not at the point that this is the last student she has here, but
I'm passing on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The mantle.
So Margie's been our PTSA president for the last 2 years, but it has been a true pleasure to work with this woman. She has exhibited an unmatched level of leadership and planning and commitment to the PTSA. This partnership that we've developed has been so fulfilling for me and also just really benefits our entire community. So she has taken on the reins of PTSA Parent Night, which for a number of years was very school-led, but instead she said, well, why don't you let the PTSA do this, and we'll really work to meet the needs of our parents. And single-handedly, she's taken that on, surveyed our parents, sourced all of the session leaders, and brought in high-quality presenters to really provide a great experience for our parents. Has done that over a couple of years. I really appreciate the Tiger Legacy t-shirts. That is a new piece, so we should probably think about getting them some of them. But it's a client project because the school and PTSA are partnering. The students enter a design contest. We award a winner, and you can go purchase the shirts. But what they're able to do then is they give every freshman a legacy t-shirt when they start each year. So just continuing some of those ideals that Lee Summit High School holds so closely. Of course, PTSA is front and foremost for scholarships and running Project Grad, which is a really important part of our school community. And this year, also, they're working in conjunction with the other two to put on a student job fair for kids. So the work that she has put in, I love seeing her face around. She's just been a tremendous asset to Lee Summit High School. So it is my honor to recognize you as the Lee Summit High School Volunteer of the Year. You're welcome. Good, you're supposed to be surprised. And I think you have to go take a picture now.
All right, at this time, we are at 3.03, which is our student board representatives. And so at this time, whoever is presenting, come on down. Before we start, just so that the full board will know, is that can someone tell Dr. Buck we're in a board meeting? But before we start for the board, they will present to us, and then we will be able to ask clarifying questions and kind of have that dialogue. We're not going to be taking any action on anything that they say today. However, we can, if there's action that needs to be done, we will be able to schedule a work session and be able to have more in-depth conversation. But if there's anything that you need clarity around their presentation, that is what we're asking and trying to gain on today. Is that okay? All righty.
All right, good evening. First off, we want to thank you guys for allowing us your time and allowing us to be here and give this presentation to you guys. So at the last work session we attended, we were tasked with gathering information from each of our schools, and that information was around what is going well for you and for others at your high school, what are you or others wrestling with at your high school, and how could the Board of Education help? So through that, all the representatives from each school went out and however they deemed most beneficial for them, collected information, and throughout this time we also went to Bernard Campbell Middle School, where we also collected some information from the students there, from their Principal's Advisory Council. All right, so up first is Lee Summit North. So what we did was we sent out a form to students that we knew, and some of our members went around to different classrooms and gave out a form. We had some printed out and we had some digital, just that way we could collect more data. And we took kind of the top responses. So what was going well was a variety of extracurriculars our school offers, our off-campus programs, and teachers and staff. Right? What could be improved were fight prevention, inclusivity, which was just like, it seems like there's casual racism and hate speech often at North. We seem to have issues with 504 plans and mental health. And what students also did not like was to remove block days, and then this was edited, but we just found out this is a PDF and not the live slide, so it didn't change. But we removed the border map and revisiting middle school boundaries because I did recall with Title I and everything, there's a reason that all of that's a little funky. And then how the Board of Education can help, implementing harsher punishments or toning down behavior for fights. Having a counselor available during weekends was one thing that we mentioned the last time all of the representatives got together. And then the boundary was something we clocked out. Right, so do you guys have any questions for Lisa Menor?
I do. What's a block day?
Okay, good question. Okay, to my knowledge, Lee Summit North is the only school in the district to still have block days? Yes. So basically Monday through Wednesday, we have our normal 1st through 7th hours. But on Thursdays, we have extended class periods where we only have hours 1, 3, 5, and 7. And then on Fridays, we have 2nd hour Bronco time, 4th hour, 6th hour, and those class periods are 90 minutes long. So a lot of students have just reached out to not enjoy that. We know it was kind of an experimental thing to give teachers longer time periods to give out tests and do labs and things like that, but we have found that it's often draining for students and attention span is not holding up well for those.
So the issue with the block days is really the length of time that it creates for some of your classes being
Yes.
90 minutes? Okay.
And also it's become a problem for certain students because of they will have this class one day and then no class for 3 days, but they had this other class, and it's just something with timing.
Makes sense. Okay. How many students filled out your questionnaire?
We had roughly, I believe, 30 fill out the printed one and 76 fill out the digital form. And that was from a variety of people in the building. We also had some staff respond to that, but aside from staff, I think only 8% was from staff. And then the rest was about equally divided between freshman through senior.
That's great. Awesome. Thanks.
Just to follow up, what was that percentage for staff that's filled out?
Roughly 8%, and
Okay.
I think that was just me. I sent it to 3 teachers.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions about our?
Vice President Foley?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, just curious, since some of the staff filled out the surveys, just from best guess, from looking at it. Do you think it aligned with what these students were saying, or do you think it seemed like it was a little bit off, or kind of how would you perceive that?
From what I looked at it, because I was able to sort by staff answering question or grade level answering question, and I could look at what each person responded, the staff had very different pressing issues than the students did. So for staff, one was more focused on education and creating education, like where can students go after high school that doesn't require college or a trade, and just preparing students for life outside of that. That was one response. Another one was a bigger concern about boarders and bus drivers and things like that. So those were, that was about it from teachers. Those were their issues.
Thank you.
With the total number of students that you were able to survey, or the other two reps, was there one, if you had to name one thing that seemed to be pretty universal, what would that one thing be?
Fights was the biggest issue that we seem to have, and that was, I'm gonna bleed into Campbell here a little bit. Campbell is, I believe, the biggest feeder school to North, and that also seemed to be their pressing issue. So it's kind of all connected through that.
Was there any additional conversations around that topic on what they perceived as, is it a high level of fights do they feel or perceive at one school versus another, or is there more that you could share?
Not to my knowledge. We didn't go too deep into it aside from just gathering the information. I know that North, at least from what all of the schools have collected, North seemed to be more concerned about fights than any other school was.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Are there any other remaining questions? All right, then I will pass it off to Lee Summit West.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So for Lee Summit West, we surveyed around, my name is Eliza Noor, by the way, senior at Lee Summit West. And so we surveyed around 75-ish people through Google Forms or interviewing our peers. And what seemed to go well, oftentimes a lot of the responses were almost everything, but the biggest emphasis was the amount of opportunities and class varieties that we had, the emphasis on career-oriented classes, such as STA, Cass Career Center, and Herndon, also with the IBCP programs and the various classes such as anatomy, HBS, or intro into engineering that really helped students hone in to what they want to do after school. Another thing that was going well was cultural celebrations. We have various clubs relating to different races, cultures, ethnicities, and that was a thing that Lee Summit West seemed to do very well, was to be very inclusive. We were very community oriented. And so the AMI days were also very well handled. Of course, we had a lot in the 2024 school season, but the way that our teachers, our staff, and the students and parents handled it was very organized in a very diligent and very good manner. And so it was what was going well in our high school plus more, but these were the most pressing, the most common that seemed to show up. So what could be improved was encouraging more involvement within clubs. Obviously, Lee Summit West, we have a lot of clubs, but oftentimes students seem to gravitate towards some, and I feel like there's not a lot of emphasis on just joining clubs as much as there is on sports. Blocking on Chromebooks. So I think this was an issue that I encountered a lot as an anatomy student. So oftentimes in high school, especially for anatomy, if we need to search something up, a lot of sites are blocked, which again is reasonable, but that was something that seemed to come up. Bathroom safety was another one. And so oftentimes students go to the bathroom not to use the restroom, but to participate in various other activities, and that was a big concern. The counseling center is also something that could be improved. We have amazing counselors, don't get me wrong, but again, I think that they need to be a little bit more, they're very educated. I think that they could be a little bit more educated on life after high school, such as what Haley mentioned. Just life after high school, them mainly focusing on students as a one-on-one, instead of just a whole group thing, just focusing on students and making them feel valued. and that relates to another thing that can be improved, such as post-secondary education readiness. There's not a lot of emphasis at Lee Summit West on things on post-secondary readiness. Again, we do have a lot. Our Miss King from our school, shout out to her. She does a great job of providing scholarships and letting students know when college visits are happening. But other than that, there's not a lot of emphasis on how we could apply to college, how we could apply for dorms or things of that nature. Another thing that came up was sports equity, where the girls' sports seem to lack in the amount of, not participation necessarily, but just seemed to be unfair versus quite bad versus the boys' sports. And then the last one was emergency and gun violence safety and education. Yeah, so those are all the things that can be improved. Again, a lot of the things at Lee Summit West are amazing and throughout the whole district, but those are things that could be improved. And the board, you guys can help by having Club Rush for all grade levels and not just freshmen. And I think that would make our community more tight-knit in a way that everyone, the students at our high school, know what clubs that they can join, the opportunities that are presented to them. Because as students at LSR7, we have a lot of opportunities. We have so many, and I think that not a lot of people know about the opportunities that we have. And then, again, an emphasis on life after high school and more emphasis on extracurriculars. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, Vice President Foley.
Thank you. I just have one question in regards to emergency and gun violence safety and education. Is that implying that the students need more education or that the staff might need more education? Like who are you guys implying should receive further education that we might be able to support?
I think just everyone. I think that there should be more emphasis and more education on all of those topics as they affect us, especially with what happened last Wednesday. But yeah, just to everyone. Ellie would like to step in for a second.
Sorry, this is the one that I dealt with mostly. Specifically on Thursday after we returned to school from the red snow day, there was no announcement made at school about anything that had happened, about additional counseling support, or just people to talk to. In addition to that, I think everything that has come about from this and all the discussions that have been happening, students are not feeling prepared to deal with those kinds of situations. And we're so grateful that we live in a community where that's not a regular thing, but the reality is becoming that it could happen, and we don't feel prepared that we can handle ourselves in those situations. Thank you.
So essentially awareness. Any other questions?
So just as a follow-up to that, when you say, Ellie, when you say that students feel not prepared, are you speaking of if there was an active shooter, what would we do as a student? Is that?
Yes, I believe it is. We don't feel prepared as the plan. We do run through where you're supposed to go in the classroom with lockdown drills, but we don't talk about gun violence at school. We don't talk about the emotional side of it and how it impacts more than just one person. So I think we're feeling disconnected from that education there.
Was there, for Lee Summit West, was there one thing that really stood out that you feel that that's pressing, that was pretty universal of the survey?
I think the most pressing issue that was presented would be after high school, life after high school, things that we could do, the opportunities that we could have after high school, college, preparedness, or trade school, or whatever you would like to do after high school. There's not emphasis on that, and I think that there should be more.
I just have one last question. Club Rush, what is that?
Club Rush is for freshmen. It's during freshman transition day, where at Lee Summit West, we, seniors, juniors, we go around and we talk to freshmen about the different clubs available. So I'm president of Girls United, so I would make a slide and we would have it in classrooms, and the freshmen would have time to go to the different clubs that they want to be a part of, that they're interested in, and go see the presentations about those clubs.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Miller.
I was just going to follow up. I love that idea because also your interests change as you get older, and you might want to learn about different clubs and opportunities. So I love that.
Thank you.
Board Member Eslick?
I did want to ask some clarifying questions about some of what can be improved. So you mentioned bathroom safety, and I know you tried not to be specific. Can you be specific on what's happening in the bathrooms that makes people feel unsafe?
Kind of the vaping. I know that my friends have encountered people just like vaping to their on their faces. Oftentimes, I know that there's been a complaint about multiple people like going into one stall during lunch and vaping, and so I think that was the biggest thing, just vapes.
Okay. That's what I kind of thought, but I just wanted to make sure I was on the right track.
I wasn't sure if that was like.
It's not a bad word. We can say it. I mean, it's not good that it's happening, but it's not a bad word. Sports equity. Can you elaborate that? I think you had kind of brought that one up.
Okay, so the sports equity thing. Yes, it's true that we do have kind of an imbalance in equipment. I wouldn't necessarily say funding, but just how much we are equipping our students to play when it comes to girls and boys. But it is sports related. Football seems to take the front foot in everything basically. We have sports that are not allowed to use the field because football needs to practice every day, twice a day for 3 hours. So like our lacrosse teams and our soccer teams and other students that are in season when football is not in season are not being able to use our turf field because we only have one turf field at West.
So the football team is using the field in their off season to practice when it's primary season for other sports. Am I getting that right? Okay.
Yes.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for that feedback. And thank you. This presentation was great.
Thank you. And then next up, we have Lisa High School. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Addison Dittamore. I'm a junior at Lee Summit High School. I also apologize because that is not our updated slide. After discussions and all that, we kind of added and took away some topics. So I will be going off of mine, so I deeply apologize from that. So currently, what is going well in Lee Summit High School, our control, just the overall control of fights is extremely better than it was in the past years, especially my freshman year. We had an average of probably 2 or 3 fights every 2 weeks. And so that is one thing that I think our administration and also students are doing a very well job of. Again, kind of like our other schools. Obviously, we're same district, get all that kind of connection. Our off-campus opportunities are outstanding, whether that is on new activities or new groups or STA, Herndon, Cass, all that kind of around that area. They just continue to grow and grow and grow, which we are very grateful for that opportunity living in the city. Overall teacher quality is amazing. I'm pretty sure that we've got all those awards and stuff in our past, but I truly think that our staff in the LSR7 district is one of the best staff around the nation. Not only do they care about their other peers and staff, but they also go out of their way to make those student and teacher connections. Following up on unmarked absences is very good, especially this year with our new administration staff. They're doing a very good job going around and pulling students out, just being like, hey, what's going on? You have this, and just kind of making all that clear so you're not going through your power school and you see, oh, well, now I have a 4-hour detention because I missed this class, but that was just a misunderstanding. So that is going very well. Here's the part that kind of switches off from your guys' slides. So lack of teacher communication is a big issue in our school, seems to be. I don't really know the behind the scenes of that, so that's not one of our biggest issues, obviously, but from a student aspect, that is one thing that we truly do hurt on is teacher communication within each other or within students and all that. New and reoccurring issues with our gender-neutral bathrooms. That is a pretty big one, I would say. Like you've already asked the other high schools, that is probably one of the biggest that we've got through all of our surveys. I'll go back on that later to kind of discuss those topics because that will be a good chunk of time. Our leadership throughout staff and students, again, I just kind of feel it's really disconnected. Even though we do have that communication and the connections between all that, the leadership aspect, which is more than just, oh, you're my teacher, congrats.
it's just, there's a big issue between there. There's no respect levels and kind of all along those leadership lines. Room locations with our new building is so sorry, I just like exhaled and kind of just, woo. Anyway, the room locations are pretty bad with us. I don't know if you guys know, but with our new building, teachers do not have assigned rooms. We are switching rooms throughout the week, so if you're tardy or stuff like that, obviously it is on you because you are a student. You have those resources to find out where those rooms are, but it is just chaos because there's different learning centers or different rooms for this. And teachers also, a big issue from teachers from what we are hearing with that going on is we're not allowed to hang up any posters or pictures like our old school had. The old Lisa High School, I don't know if you guys were in it, but it had a lot of like pictures from like a while ago of activities and teams, and there's just not that sense of home anymore with our blank walls. Bullying is still an issue. I know that sounds pretty elementary because we are high school students and teenagers and we should be able to figure that out, but apparently we're not mature enough. So bullying is a very big issue. It has been brought up to administration, students, and it just keeps reoccurring. Building security, whether like that's what they said with bringing stuff to school like vapes and guns, and we had some issues like that, and weapons is a pretty big issue. There's also been some students from other schools that have just somehow wandered onto our campus and in our building to act as a student and just kind of wandered our halls. So that is a pretty big issue because from a student aspect, it just makes us wonder who can get in our building and who cannot. For you guys, how the Board of Education could help. Use of advisory time, I think that's something that we have to discuss within a school and not necessarily something that you guys can do. More thorough watch with issues, so basically security, all that kind of stuff. Vape detectors is a very big one, like other schools said, which is very sad that we have to say that. Connection times, basically with administration, so getting connected with those students, even though we are pretty good on that, there's still that lack of communication and stuff like kind of along those lines. And the reason we don't really have a ton of solutions on there is because these are pretty big topics, and so it's hard to sit here and kind of think of these solutions off the top of our heads, so that will be needed for further discussions. So, any questions from you guys?
Can you go back to the gender-neutral bathrooms as far as what issues are arriving?
Yes, so I think we're the only school with gender-neutral bathrooms, which is a little confusing from our perspective because we just kind of came into our new building and they were just there. But to kind of give you guys a layout, we only have one or two like specific girl and boy bathrooms that are separate. So our gender-neutral bathrooms are basically a wide open space with floor to ceiling, stall doors, and it's just kind of just wide open, like you walk in. So the issues that we are having in that is not school-appropriate activities between couples and just, yeah, stuff like that, because obviously there's no way of seeing anything. Vaping, smoking, and drugs is insane. It is probably at its peak of issues right now. And then just, I know like we're a society that's like, oh, my feelings, my feelings, my feelings. But this is kind of something that does keep coming up, and it is uncomfortable for students, teachers, visitors, like just going in the same bathroom and doing whatever you need to do with groups of boys just standing there staring at you and making comments like to girls specifically, or the like opposite way around with girls making comments to boys. It is just a very, very, very uncomfortable situation that we're put in, and it requires us to go across the building to go to the other bathroom if we feel comfortable. Which takes out of our education, our class time, and then we get kind of pulled into the, well, why were you gone for 12 minutes? But there's a lot of drug usage, inappropriate relationship stuff, and just overall feeling that uncomfortable tension between all that.
I know that probably made you really uncomfortable to talk about, so thank you for being brave and bringing those concerns up on behalf of your peers. I don't know if anybody else, I'm still formulating questions. She gave us a lot of information that's very big, and I'm still unpacking it in my head. So if somebody else has questions.
Just before, so sorry. But yeah, like you said, that I guess is an uncomfortable topic for a lot of us, but I think out of every single form or interview that we did, because we did various ways, that is a big concern within students, administrators, visitors, and students in general. So that, I think, is our biggest issue currently.
Okay, Dr. Johnson, then Vice President Foley.
So I wanted to follow up on the rooms not being consistent, and so forgive my ignorance in this topic. I thought that that was just something that was happening during construction. So no, so this is something that was continuing. So again, that's my mistake. I was not aware of that. And so it's the changing of the rooms that still presents an issue, just so I'm clear.
Yes, ma'am. So I think the biggest issue with that is obviously with a whole bunch of new upcoming discoveries of all learning styles and all that. For many students, whether it's our special needs program and they have like those sensory issues, it is hard, even just as a student going through our day-to-day life, going from one area that we're doing math in this huge area that's a circle table and just kind of switching back and forth, because it kind of gets a little stressful when you have to start worrying about how your classroom is going to set up and how this affects this and all these other things when you could just be worrying about your education. Obviously, that is probably one of our other biggest issues, is just the way it affects students' education.
Vice President Foley.
Thank you. You mentioned weapons in the building. So if that is occurring, do you and your peers feel comfortable speaking up and speaking out? Is that getting reported? Or is that something you think that there's a culture that is preventing that from being reported? Or do you guys feel that when students do bring something inappropriate, that it is addressed appropriately?
I kind of think it's a mixture of both. However, I do know for a lot of students that is uncomfortable because we're going usually bell to bell studying, so you don't want to be in the middle of the class and just be like, he has a weapon. And so I think it's a little uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I will say there are really good students that go out of their way and they report it. But then I will say that those are also kind of being held back because I feel like we don't have the resources where we can connect to someone. However, I will say when students that I've known or have been in my classes have reported it, it has not been properly addressed, in my opinion, with that student, and it keeps reoccurring. So I think if it keeps reoccurring, there's obviously an issue there, no matter how that's going about.
Okay. So I know you talked about a lack of teacher communication, and I know there were a lot of things that were going well with teachers on the other side in this column. So with regard to the communication specifically, you kind of talked a little bit about communication with teacher to teacher. So is it mostly that, or teachers communicating with students that seems to be more of the issue? I guess elaborate more on that.
I think it honestly depends on the situation. Currently, I think it's kind of a mixture of both, of teacher, and student, like a little triangle there. So whether it's e-hall passes, or where a student's been, or what's going on, or who needs to be where, I think that is one of our biggest issues also, because with that communication, there's oftentimes students being like, oh, well, my teacher said this, which is completely not true. So that breaks that triangle of trust and communication. So I think we need to find better ways of students to not only communicate with those teachers, but with those teachers communicate behind the scenes to make sure that everything is going on correctly. I think that would add to our building's trust and security issues if we just had those background support methods of different issues and problems through communication.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I'm going to
you.
go ahead and pass it on to Summit Bridge.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anaya Dandy. I'm a senior at Summit Bridge. What's going well at my school is that people are able to get their work done. So basically like completing their course that they're going through. Another thing is good grades, good work ethic, which basically like ties into the same thing. And then social environment. So I guess it's pretty chill there, like nothing really goes on much. And then what we're struggling with is mental health, staying motivated, and like getting more kids engaged, I guess. And then how you guys can help is by increasing funding at SRA, mental health check-ins, and be more engaged with like the staff at our schools. So, any questions?
Any questions? Vice President Foley?
Thank you. I do have one. Okay, since it was mentioned about increased funding at SRA, is there anything in particular that you can think of that if we were able to wave a magic wand and give you guys a bunch of money that you would point it to? Or is there a certain area where you think you guys are just lacking in a resource that we might be able to provide that funding for?
I would probably say the classroom space. Like, I don't know if construction on the school is possible, but like the classrooms are super small, and usually there's like a bunch of students in one classroom, so it feels like really crowded, and then we have like our backpacks and stuff. So I would say probably construction.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Board Member Miller?
So I have a question about, this is actually the second time this week that I've heard from young people about mental health check-ins. Can you tell me a little bit about what does that look like? How would you envision us being able to have mental health check-ins?
So for me, mental health check-in would look like basically taking each student and asking them like, what's going on? Like, is there anything like you need help with? Like, what's going on at home? Basically just getting more in tune with the students, because I know like for our generation, it's become a common thing to just like hide behind this persona just to get through school, when that's not even the case. Like, you could be going through stuff and like it makes school even more difficult. So I feel like in order to improve in school, you need to be in the right headspace, and I feel like getting those mental health check-ins would definitely help a lot of students.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions? When you say getting kids more engaged, what does that look like?
So I would say probably like talking more. Like, what I noticed like at the school, there's not a lot of kids who like talk. They're like really standoffish, or like maybe getting more groups in the school or like clubs. Because even though I know it's like a small school and most students are only there for like 4 or 5 months, not even the whole school year, I would say like more clubs and stuff, just to make the school feel like more of a community instead of everyone being individuals, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Any other questions? Okay. Let me, how many people were you able to question?
Okay, so I currently like don't go to the school because like I'm technically done. So I was able to get like, I want to say like 13 responses, and most of them were pretty informal. You know how kids are, they're like, I don't know, or like they don't put anything at all. So I feel like I got a pretty good average for how many students are at SRA.
From this experience with you all having 3 weeks, and anyone can answer this question, are there things that you feel you would have wanted to do differently to get more voices? When you look at the student populations, we know that they exceed way more than 100 people, right? Or 75 people. Is there any idea on what you probably could have done different to get more voices that really possibly could truly represent the entire school and not just a very small, because I would consider this being a small fraction of the school when you have roughly 1,000, 1,200 students in our schools. And so 1,900 in each one of our schools. And so I'm just curious to know, are there some ideas that you all have around that?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, so first off, kind of our school did not only like pushing out their Schoology and pushing out their teachers to send to students. Some of us did newspaper, yearbook kind of style of interviews. However, I do think the easiest, well not easiest, but most beneficial way next time will be to kind of make out an entire like school notification, whether that's through our broadcasting team where they show their videos weekly, or that's through yearbook, or it's through the teachers making morning announcements. I know this is a very brand new program with our reps and you guys, so I understand you gotta fail before you can truly succeed. But currently, we're not known at our school, so I think us students completely take responsibility of kind of being pushed behind. But I think if we kind of make ourselves more present, whether that's talking during assembly or doing announcements or stuff kind of getting ourselves out there, I think will be a lot more beneficial to get student and teachers' voices.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Anyone else would like to weigh in?
I agree with Addison. I think that personally, I believe that I could have taken more of an initiative to reach out to a wider demographic, whether it be through freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, because I feel like oftentimes we are more comfortable with people in our grade level. I think it would have been more beneficial for somehow to arrange Titan times, to interview one-on-one, to get that personal connection and also get the word out, but also get honest responses. So I think just taking the initiative to interview our peers and just get more of the word out, like Addison said.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? No? Okay. Board Member Miller?
Well, first, I just want to say, Addison, just to your comment, you did not fail. I want you all to hear that loud and clear. I think you all did an incredible job with the task at hand. We are very impressed by your reports and what you brought to us. You had a short amount of time, right? You kind of took it and ran with it. So I want you all to know, whether you were up here speaking or not, that you did an incredible job. And I think I speak for the board in saying that we appreciate the work that you did to bring this to us. We're excited for this journey. We're grateful for the student voices. So congratulations, because this was no small feat. So congratulations, well done.
To add on to you real quick, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us. I truly think that really stood out to us that you just mentioned that, because with this being new, it wasn't stressful, but it was definitely, you were in for a ride. Being student-led and student-run for this is new to some people, and so like you said, we didn't fail, but definitely going on. I think this was a really good learning opportunity, and so I'm very glad that you guys brought this up to our attention, our first meeting with barely knowing each other. So I just want to say that I'm excited for you guys to be able to hear our upcoming projects and presentations for you guys, because this was an amazing learning opportunity experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you too for opening our eyes to, because a lot of times we hear things, but it is much more impactful when it's coming directly from you all. So thank you so much for what you guys did. And like Erica said, it was not a fail, and you kind of have to rise to the occasion. You guys did, and I mean, you see what works, what doesn't work, and you tweak it, and you just get better. So, I mean, it was not a fail. It was a great job. Thank you.
Vice President Foley?
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge that we haven't gone all the way through the slides, and so I don't want you guys to think that we have forgotten that, but I just kind of wanted to piggyback on the part about getting additional feedback. You guys have done an incredible job putting this presentation together. The likelihood that your peers are going to watch a board meeting, I think, is pretty low. So I would highly encourage you guys to take this presentation and share that back with your peers. Show them the work that you did. And this is a great way to have a conversation starter with them to say, do you agree? Do you disagree? And especially if they disagree, say, hey, next time, make your voice heard and respond to my survey. But you guys did an incredible job, and I'm excited to hear more.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let you all address the middle school slide and that experience, and then we'll wrap this up unless there's some additional conversations. Is that fair? All right.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ellie Johnson, and I'm a senior from Lisa West High School, but I'm actually going to be presenting today about Bernard Campbell Middle School. I just want to preface, the reason that I'm presenting about Bernard Campbell is because I felt extremely passionate about these students and hearing from them. So that's why I will be presenting about them for you today. Also, Board Member Esslick, I wanted to clarify my statement about football. It's not the team, it's a group of players. Just wanted to, yeah, sorry. I did not say that correctly the first time. Okay, so what's going well in Bernard Campbell Middle School? The students, which was the principal's advisory board, I believe, was made up of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. There was probably about 50 of them, an equal group of each. They liked the class variety and their club and sports opportunities. The Rise Up events, which is their transitional help experiences like freshman transition day, but for them it'd be like 6th grade transition day. They also said staff is, quote, really awesome. So that was a great positive. On to what could be improved, I will say, like Haley mentioned earlier, fights was a very prevalent issue that arose. That was probably one of the first responses we got when we asked about what could be improved. They also mentioned that the bell schedules, there's too many students in the hallways. I'm not sure what the student populations at each middle school look like, but from what I was hearing from students, it sounds like there are almost too many at Campbell for the size of their school. And from that, it causes long lines in their bathrooms, at the water fountains, and all of those areas for them during passing periods. So they mentioned that that causes them to be tardy to classes and feel uncomfortable with, asking their teachers for additional time. May I go fill my water bottle? May I go to the restroom? Things like that. They also mentioned their e-hall passes. They get 2 per day. And by 2 per day, I asked them to clarify. They said that includes bathroom, if their Chromebook is not working, if they need to go to the library and get a book, if they need to refill their water bottle, things like that. They only get 2 per day. And they said that that's not enough because during those passing periods, the lines are too long for them to wait. They'll be tardy. They can't ask their teachers because their teachers' responses are, you should have budgeted your time better. And if they can only use 2 per day, that's not enough for them is what they have told us. And the reason that they have 2 per day is because they have a limit of 50 students in the hall at one time. Moving on to how they mentioned the board could help. I actually didn't even ask them this question. They saw it on the board and they immediately were jumping on this one. They talked about a more opening counseling center. So they recognized that the reason for their fights is because they feel there's a lack of community among them. And they believed that having more open communication with their counselors more often would be very beneficial for them. They also mentioned support groups to prevent the tension and conflicts that can arise and how to better cope with situations instead of using physical violence. Again, they mentioned the e-hall pass system and those bathroom breaks. They talked about increasing those or potentially adding an extra minute to passing periods. Us as the student representatives did talk about how probably increasing the hall passes would be more beneficial than an extra minute during passing period for them. The students also mentioned staggering their bell schedules because of how many students are in the hallways. That's how they dismiss at the end of the day. 6th grade is dismissed first, but they talked about throughout the school day staggering bell schedules potentially. And then the last one was just listening to them. They were the principal's advisory board, but from what they said to us, they feel very unheard in their school. So thank you guys. Does anyone have any questions?
So you said you were getting feedback from the principal's advisory board. So was it just that group of students that was given this feedback, or was it a broader audience? How many students is that?
Yes, so it was just the principal's advisory board, and I believe it was about 50 students probably in there.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, listen, we want to say thank you on behalf of the Board of Education for doing your due diligence. There will obviously be more discussion on how the board can best support the student reps. We appreciate your patience with us while we're trying to learn ourselves what we can look like, but how we can also best serve to make sure that there is a true and fair representation of the voice that you all are bringing back for the Board of Education. So we thank you. We truly appreciate it, and we will continue this and also thank for the rest of our student reps that are present. Let's give them a hand for all that are present. Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move to our next item, which is going to be board reports and meetings attended. We're going to begin with our Finance Committee report. We know, well, I'll just turn it over to, well, we know that it's recorded live and it's on Wednesdays prior to our meeting, and they can be viewed on YouTube. However, if there's any additional comments that anyone from Finance would like to bring to the board's attention, we can do that at this time. No? All right, so at this time, I'm going to start with Board Member Eslick to give us our board reports and meetings attended. Thank you.
Mine will be short and sweet. Just like many of us in this room, I attended the mayor's character breakfast, which was a couple of weeks ago, but feels like a year ago at this point. Times have been crazy. I also had the Lee Summit Education Foundation Board of Directors meeting, and it was already talked about that we have Taste of Lee Summit coming up next week. So if you're not registered, they still have some tickets left. And I also attended, of course, the Finance Committee meeting. I was sadly absent for the Board Policy Committee, so I will have to wait for that, waiting eagerly for President Sparks' report on that one. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, let's go on with Board Member Miller.
All right. I attended along with several of my board members, the NSBA conference, which is National School Board Association Conference in Washington, D.C. So that was amazing and incredible to connect with other board members from across the country, as well as speaking to some legislators and things like that. Mayor's Character Breakfast. I also attended the court warming pep assembly at Lee Summit West, and kudos to Dr. Maid and the staff there. They did a great job. It's no small feat to engage 1,900 teenagers and make it look fun, and they did. They had fun. Everybody was having fun, so kudos to them. I attended the Chamber Gala, which was wonderful. I also participated in a before-school art club at Greenwood Elementary, and that was so much fun. Lee Summit North hosted, as Dr. Buck said, the governor and the DESE commissioner, so that was an incredible opportunity to hear from them as well as our young people. 100 People Who Care, what a great event. Just so great to see so many amazing things happening in our community, and just really helps you remember that people do care, and there's programs out there and resources, and it's amazing. And then lastly, I attended the 2024 Mental Health Summit, Youth Mental Health Summit, and that was put on by Prodeo, Rediscover, and Lee Summit Cares. And again, just like showing of our student reps, I mean, our future is really bright. You know, when we look at all of the young people that we have before us, and at that mental health summit, it was just incredible to hear their voices, and so just very grateful for all the young people who make their voices heard. So thank you.
Board Member Murdoch.
Just a couple of things. I didn't have actually any official meetings because we're going to have 2 government relations meetings in between now and our next meeting in March. So that's actually tomorrow morning, where normally we would be reporting out on that. But my quick summary would be, got to go to 2 of the theater productions throughout the district, which have been great. Went to 2 concerts, went to a Scholar Bowl, and a couple of different sporting events. So trying to make the rounds as best I could. And I do have to, just because they did win, we brought home a win from Las Vegas. So that was fantastic. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and go with Board Member Garrett.
Thank you. Yes, I attended the mayor's character breakfast as well, and that was an exciting event to see many great citizens in our community be recognized. I attended the NSBA symposium in Washington, D.C., and there were a lot of great speakers there, motivational speakers. Trying to think. We got to meet some of legislation in Washington, D.C., got to meet with their reps, had a chance to advocate, and trying to think. I can't remember anything else, but there was a lot that we packed in. So that's probably why it seems like it was a blur. But then we also had the CSDGKC Legislative Appreciation Meeting, Reception, and Dinner. So that gave us an opportunity to be able to meet with our state legislators and kind of get an update on what is happening in Jeff City. And that was about it.
Okay, Dr. Johnson.
Extremely short. I went to Team Lee Summit.
Vice President Foley.
Thank you. This past month, I visited with the Lee Summit High School Robotics Team Driven. I attended the Mayor's Character Breakfast. I attended the NSBA Equity Symposium and Advocacy Institute in Washington, D.C. I attended the Real World Learning Partner and Recognition Luncheon and the signing of the official charter for STA at Paradise Park FFA chapter. And then a few days later, I attended the STA open house at Paradise Park. I wanted to particularly draw attention to 100 People Who Care. So we have amazing nonprofits in our area. There was several of them that we got to hear from that night, but I wanted to recognize the winner, Choose to Live. I personally know families that have been affected by suicide, and they have had Robin come alongside them in their grief, connect with them with counseling, and continue to check in on them after time has passed and let them know that their loved one is not forgotten. So I was very excited to see that Choose to Live was the winner for that, and I was glad to hand her my check. I also attended a webinar on policy and practice of improving reading outcomes. That's it.
Okay, I also attended our trip in DC, had a wonderful time. It was also some time to be able to spend with my colleagues, and so that was a great time. And then the courses and the classes that were also offered. One of the things, and I was just sharing that when we were in our work session, was having the conversation with our evaluation board evaluation, and she was advocating for us to be able to present like our community engagement things. All of those different type of things we do get credit for us in our continued education that can go towards your certification. And so I would just encourage the board to continue to try to attend these conferences, to try to be instructor at some of these conferences, because it does help to build our governance level of understanding, but then also to be able to see a wide range of what other districts are doing. You know, it's good to know what we're doing here in Lee Summit. It's good to know what we're doing in the state of Missouri, but it's also good to be able to see what is happening broader around education, and that we're not the only ones in the fight to be able to support public education. And so I just would like to continue to encourage this board to do just that. Board leadership meeting with Vice President Foley and Dr. Buck. Board Policy Committee. In Board Policy Committee, we in closed session kind of talked about that board policy that's going to be coming our way. There is a policy that also, I'm just going to give a heads up, that I am asking the board to look at, and that is the policy that is around when we hear about fights happening, but we also, there is, for all fights, there is a, what's happening with the fights? Citations with Lee Summit Police Department. And so there are some concerns around that topic, and I think that it's important that the full board has this conversation to see if this is an appropriate direction that we should be going in as a district around. Also, was able to see our students. I truly want to thank Lee Summit North team that came together, that invited our governor to our school district. I will tell you that the governor not only said how outstanding our district is, he commended our board on how outstanding we are as a district. And so it was just great to be able to have his presence. You know, one of the things I tell people is the governor is the president of our state, right? And so to be able to have him in our district, that is special. And so I appreciate the fact that he decided to come to LSR7. And then last but not least, Black History Month, right? We're in the month of February, and so I have been able to see in all of our schools things that the schools are doing in their own way to be able to recognize the achievements of Black individuals. But then also at Lee Summit North, they're going to be having a Black History program. And so if you have not attended that program, please, if you're able to, please attend it. It's going to be during their 6th hour. And then also there's going to be a step show competition at Lee Summit North on Friday night. And so if you're able to do that, I believe that starts at 6:30. So other than that, that's what I have, and we'll go ahead and move to our next item on the agenda.
Next agenda item is 5.01, approval of transfer of funds.
I move to approve the transfer of $5,151,691.19 from the general fund to the special revenue fund.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes.
Next agenda item is 5.02, approve treasurer's report and payment of the bills.
I move to approve the treasurer's report and the payment of the bills.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Our next set of agenda items is the items for decision consent, 6.01 to 6.12.
Do I have a motion to approve our consent items?
I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you.
Our next agenda item is 7.1, item for decision, STA Aerospace Academy Project Lease Summit Airport, and I believe Dr. Shelton is coming up to the microphone.
Thank you. Yes, what you had before you is the documents from the bid opening that the City of Lee Summit collected, and what we're bringing forward is an opportunity for our district to partner with the airport as they build a new hangar. In that hangar, we would occupy about 10,000 square feet for our aerospace program. We originally thought that cost would be about $2.5 million. All in, it looks like it'll be just around $1.2 million for us to participate in that construction project.
Okay, the board has the projected budget before us. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to review it. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Board Member Murdoch.
I just have one, and forgive my ignorance on this one, because this has been a project in the making, right, for quite some time. Have we established a final MOU with the City of Lee Summit in regards to the project? Like, has that been approved?
So you approved the MOU,
the initial,
and it was a $2.5 million. So this is half that amount,
right?
For the agreement of how we would occupy the space and you know, basically a free lease forever.
Yeah, but what I'm actually asking then is, since they're going to be approving the construction stuff coming up in March, right, most likely in the city council, then will we revisit then that MOU with the final costs associated with it and any agreements and stuff like that that would need to be done?
I don't believe that's going to be necessary. I believe
Okay.
the initial MOU provides
gives us the coverage on it no matter what.
The framework on how we're going to move forward.
Okay,
with the
that's fine.
construction
I just wanted to make sure. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, is there any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
I move that the board approve funding for the Summit Technology Aerospace Academy project at Lee Summit Airport.
Do I have a second?
Second. Thanks. I couldn't get it to come up there.
All in favor, raise your right. Well, actually, for item decision, if we can go ahead and do a roll call on this one, please. You got a question? Okay.
Board Member Murdoch,
Aye.
President Sparks,
Aye.
Board Member Eslick,
Aye.
Board Member Foley,
Aye.
Board Member Miller,
Aye.
Board Member Johnson, Board Member Garrett.
Okay, our next item is going to be item for decision 7.02, expansion of the pre-K classrooms. Who's presenting?
All right, it will be me. So this is kind of go over this. This is a recommendation coming to you from Citizen Advisory Committee. This is a topic we've heard a lot from our governor, our Missouri Chamber, our Missouri Department of Economic Development as a workforce issue over the last 2 years. We started to put together a Pratt ourselves to study this beginning of the year. But then we heard there was interest in the board, and the board also interested in involving the CAC. So if you recall, October 5th, we were at Lee Summit West in the library for a work session, a special meeting actually, it wasn't a session, work session. And you charged the Citizen Advisory Committee with studying potential pre-K expansion. So what happened after that? After steering committee met, we had an initial meeting talking about what early ed programming looks like that we have at Paradise Park, because that meeting was at Paradise Park, and then kind of set the stage for what pre-K exploration could look like and had some questions. Then the steering committee then lined out the rest after that. So steering committee has President Sparks on it and a steering committee members of the CAC. So over about 50 members participated then in the rest of these meetings as well. So we kind of mapped it out as being these 3 meetings. That field trip ended up being a Zoom meeting in between meeting number 2 and 3 though. So the first meeting was to understand what we have and what we currently do and what our potential needs were. The second meeting was going to be focused on space, expenses, revenue, capacity. And then 3 was going to be trying to prioritize and make recommendations. So I'm going to kind of go through these meetings as we go forward. So showing you the exact agenda that we used. I kind of talked a little bit about what the governor and such has been talking about. Then community members also talked about their personal experiences and finding and the wait lists they have for early childhood. Then we invited multiple preschool partners to come, private providers. We had one show and was incredibly gracious and shared what they do and what their thoughts of this expansion would be. By the way, we have 2 board members at these meetings, so 2 of you were at these. Then we had a detailed, it says Shelley Sanders and Dr. Stacy Mathis, and they definitely presented, but we also had both principals of both Great Beginning programs there, and they kind of seesaw between them, sharing all the different programs, and I'll hit on that in the next slide a little bit. And at the end, Ms. Sanders facilitated discussion, and then I also had an exit ticket of questions. And so as we left, we ended up with 4 pages of questions and answers. We provide them at meeting number 2. So here's a little bit more detail of that meeting. Again, we had that refresher of what the charge was, but here's what we talked about at Great Beginnings we offer. And we after each one, we gave process time, Q&A time, and such. So parents as teachers, speech improvement services, Head Start, early childhood, and the 2 different programs there, Title I. So we talked about in depth what we do. We also, Ms. Sanders also shared what North Kansas City had done in their past, and we start talking about what other areas do as well. Again, we had that guest presentation. So we had some data pieces around there, and we had some requests for some specific data pieces, which we end up finding for the next meeting. So just show you, we're the 6th largest school district in the state. This is of September, the last Wednesday of September is the official count date. So this is last school year, not 23 September, but 22 September. We ranked 18th in this number of students we were serving in pre-K. So pre-K for us is mostly 3 through 5 and mostly through early childhood special education. But we have Head Start and Title I and other things. So we're the 6th largest district, but we're the 18th largest in number of pre-K students we are serving. You can see many of the districts above us, St. Louis, Kansas City, Independence, Hazelwood, Francis Howell, Park Hill, Ferguson, they're all smaller than us. Some of them quite a bit smaller. And in fact, if you look at Raytown as number 23, they're 3 times smaller than us, but we're just barely bigger in what we serve. So there are a few districts around us for their size, whether you're talking a big district like North Kansas City or a district that's a third of size, Raytown, they're probably putting more into pre-K than we are. So after every topic we talked about, Ms. Sanders asked them to do this kind of a process of reflection. What 3 important points from information, what squares with you. Notice a little, she was an elementary teacher. I was a high school science teacher, so I would not have had these. And what is still circling in your mind? It's still really good, Shelley, I like it. And at the end, again, we had that exit ticket. So we had a lot of process time. It wasn't only sit and get, but their heads were full. And before this meeting started, by the way, I know that people are coming in with their preconceived notions. I really challenged the entire group, 50 people, to suspend what they want to do. Instead, I want them to truly learn what we offer and then what we possibly could do, and then we'll prioritize together. And we also brought in, information of what Tulsa does, what the state of Tennessee does with their universal pre-K, quite a bit of information. So then our second meeting ended up being more towards the last agenda item and less on the comparable data. And that was partly because of scheduling. Ms. Sanders had to be 2 places at one time. But Ms. Sanders shared the information that she had collected and the Q&A pieces around that. So we ended up going over the big 6, what they do, what North Kansas City does, what Raytown does. And then it was really the Dr. Shelton, Mr. Holder show, and they went really in depth on 4 different, really it's 2 models, but variations of those models, and what revenue could look like and expense would look like. And then talking about where it could be facility-wise. Do you do it at sites, 1 classroom per building throughout the district? Do you do 1 site, the advantages, disadvantages of both, and all those pieces. And that two big buckets is really there's a state funding program and universal program. So in state law in Missouri, there is funding for up to 4% of the student population the prior year you had in free and reduced lunch. So that limits the number of kids that could go into it. And the students have to be free and reduced lunch qualifying to be in that state funding pre-K program. So there is some funding. It doesn't cover the whole cost, but there is some funding. Universal means we'd pay for it all, right? Now, they did not go for universal. They ended up going tuition-based, which is a third version, but this is kind of the base we built everything off of to say you could scale up and down from all these pieces. So we went in depth. That we spent a long time. It said we were going to be over at 8:30. We were out here well after 9 o'clock. And their heads were full. So then we were going to have a tour of the members who could go to the tour up at North Kansas City at their Early Childhood Center. They have a big one they've expanded recently. I believe it was a box store they bought and made it into an Early Childhood Center. Unfortunately, the 10th and the 12th both were snow days, and the 11th looked like it potentially could be, and I think they did have pretty bad weather up there. So we made a decision, let's switch that and to a Zoom. It actually being better because then we could record it and all the CAC could watch it. So and during that, we went over, again, what do they offer, their finances, facilities, lessons learned, and I think that was probably even the most important part of that. So they spent a lot of time with us, so thank you to Katie Lawson up there at North Kansas City. So then we went into our last meeting, which is, again, we reviewed all this information, including articles, including data, including the information shared, and then we kind of, I took them through a kind of a pro-con model and doing a gallery walk. And after they fully understood the models they were looking at, then we had some prioritization. We got down to 2. Then we got the one that looked like it was definitely probably the one they're leaning towards. But even that, it still wasn't crystal clear. So then we turned it over to the co-chairs, which is Elaine Blum and Stephen Hill. Thank you both to them. And they worked the rest of the meeting trying to come up with a recommendation, which is coming before you now. Before I get to the recommendation, I have 2 more slides after this. I want to thank every CAC member who spent a ton of time, both in the meetings and outside the meetings. The private vendor who came, couldn't thank them enough. 2 board members and the alternate, because you said you only went to 1 meeting last month, but you were the alternate. You came to the CAC meeting, so you had another one. And then Katie Lawson at North Kansas City, also she gave willingly of her time and also provided us a lot of information before and after that meeting. And then the staff, and there's more staff involved, but these are the ones that got up on the mic. Shelly Sanders, Jeannie Cook, Sarah Mitchell, Stacy Mathis, Christy Barger, Steve Shelton, and Nathan Holder. So thank you to all the staff members who participated, as well as the 2 board members. So here's the recommendation, and I'm going to read through it, but I want to point out before I start reading through it, the bolded, underlined was not something they wanted to fill in. They said, district, you choose what the tuition would be. And then, so we're putting placeholders, but you could change it. But they did not make that part of the recommendation. I just wanted to point that out. So for the 24-25 school year, add 9 classrooms for pre-K for the year prior to kindergarten eligibility, so 4 years old and up. The 9 classrooms will be housed at Prairie View Elementary. The breakdown of those classrooms will be 6 full day and 1 classroom that will be an AM, PM shift classrooms that are going to be those ADA classrooms. So there'll be state fundings, okay? And then there are 2 more classrooms, 1 full day and 1 half day, that'll be tuition. The full day being $200 a day, $100. It says week. I'm sorry. Yeah, week. It is right. Week. $200 a week for full day, $100 a week for half day. So those 2 classrooms. And obviously, if there is more interest than we can fill, it would be done by a lottery, is what they were talking about. So why 200? We just had to pick a starting spot. Dr. Shelton kind of did a survey of groups around us, and 230 seemed to be the average. There's one prominent one in our community. It's 270 a week. So we were trying to pick a lower amount, but again, you could change the dollar amount. But that $200 and $100 amount goes into, and you have more details in this, but I wanted to show the sum of it, goes into the revenue expense here. Year 1, there's startup costs. Prairie View Elementary has furniture built for older kids, so we have to get new furniture, some things like that. And so it'll be a negative, if we approve this, it'll be a negative budget item for us next year of negative $800,000. And the year after that and ongoing will be over the negative $300,000 piece, which kind of matches North Kansas City. They said they lose probably $35,000 to $50,000 per classroom after the first year. So if 9 classrooms, that'd be about $450,000 they lose every year for 9 classrooms. So just want to point out the financial impact piece. But obviously the committee's making a recommendation, not on the financial impact, they're making it on the student impact piece with the financial impact in mind. So without that, I'll open it up for questions. We have Dr. Mathis here, we have Ms. Sanders, Dr. Barger, Dr. Shelton, Mr. Holder. They're all here ready to answer your questions as well as we discuss this and see if you want to move forward with this recommendation.
And then also there's 2 board members. So if there's any question that you all would have of us that was present through that process, we can weigh in also. So I open up for any discussion. Like I have Dr. Johnson.
So I was just curious, considering we're an employer, local business, and we have local business partners, has it been looked at all how this impacts our early childhood centers that are already located here in Lee Summit, or there pretty much enough students to go around?
So I can't 100% fully answer that because not all of them would engage that we try to engage with. We have been told there's 2-year waiting lists at some of the more prominent ones. And this would only be the year before kindergarten, not birth to 5. So we think based on those 2 pieces, when we talked to North Kansas City, they end up serving about 35, when they put all their package together, not 35%, it's a larger percent than that of their kindergarten class, but they said nobody went out of business. And they're going to be larger than us still, even with us doing this.
Vice President Foley.
Thank you. I just wanted to share with the board that I did have a question, and I had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Buck the other night at an event to get some clarification. So my question was in regards to the space being at Prairie View Elementary. In my tour before, I knew that space was available. I knew that it was vacant. But I did have the concern about us choosing that space for this program and then not having space for other potential programs that we would like to explore. One in particular I was thinking about was something that we've kind of talked about but haven't really approached yet, with the mental health support and safety supports for elementary age students that don't qualify for SRA or Miller Park or Hilltop. So having an environment and a space for some of those students, and I didn't know how we would be able to prioritize the 2. But after talking with Dr. Buck, it sounds like even after putting this program in Prairie View, there would be additional space for additional programs. So if we do have additional programs that we do want to approach, that would be a possible opportunity.
Yeah, and to follow that up, if you look at middle school, I think we're at about 10 kids max that go to any type of alternative setting outside of Miller Park. Because in Miller Park, obviously, you qualify for an IEP. There is that still for elementary as well. But you're talking about students who do not qualify for IEP, and it wouldn't be appropriate for Miller Park. You're right, we don't have that for elementary, but the middle school level, it's about 10 kid max. So that you're talking 1 or 2 classrooms, we could definitely find an end of a building with its separate entrance within the district if we need to do that in the future. By the way, Prairie View, I guess I should have said this, Prairie View has a north and south entrance, has office space and north. It was meant to be 2 elementary buildings kind of, has 2 libraries and everything else. So right now we have our online education and we can relocate them, and there is a small cost in this, which is included in this, to relocate them. And right now, we also have our GREAT program there this year while we're finishing up the new flight building and renovating the GREAT building. So they were here last year and this year, but they will not be there next year. So you're talking moving a few online classrooms, which Dr. Shelton already has multiple ideas. I think he has one that's leading the way, but it hasn't been determined exactly which spot. But regardless, it will be a small cost.
Okay, we're going to go with Board Member Murdoch and then Board Member Eslick.
A few questions here, and I might even have a few more once other people have some ideas and comments here. Number one is how many students are we going to serve in the 9 classrooms? Do we anticipate?
220 students.
Right. So what was the impetus for deciding? I know you just mentioned that Prairie View is kind of built as 2 schools. How did the discussion go? I'm curious how the discussion went around putting a class in each one of our elementary schools so that the kids are going to their neighborhood school that they would then go to if they were pre-K going to their elementary school. How did that discussion go, or was there a detailed discussion about that?
Very much so. Very much so.
So can you give me some highlights?
So I don't think we were looking at, when we were talking about satellite sites, I'll call it that, there wasn't going to be 18 of them. So every school wouldn't have got one. When we talked to Katie Lawson, one of the things she talked about is there's advantages and disadvantages of both. But as far as staffing and coverage of each other, as well as having a community of pre-K, there is benefits of having one site. Whether that, be honest with you, when I was facilitating a meeting, I did not insert myself in each group as they're talking about it, so I couldn't tell you what each CAC member talked about. That would be your two board members might be able to share that, but in the end, they were pretty strong that they wanted one site is what they decided. I stood up here, prompting them next step, next step.
So that kind of dovetails into this. Give me the transportation issues that will go along with this proposal.
So currently, the recommendation is no transportation, which would be similar to what pre-K has now. Obviously, at Great Beginnings, early childhood special education, if you have an IEP, there is transportation. If you're typically developing peer, there's not. So that is matching that piece there. We talked about there is additional costs. There was concern that do we have staffing to go all over the district for picking up pre-K on top of what we're doing now. In September, I would have said, yes, we do. Since October, November, maybe by November, I don't know if we do. So that was a concern. Can we meet that call if that was the call? Let me add, North Kansas City, they don't use their own bus transportation for it. So they don't provide it for all students. There are certain zip codes or certain neighborhoods they do. Am I saying this right? I don't know how to say. Certain attendance area, elementary areas, they provide it, and some they don't. And they outsource that with that service that we considered earlier for Great Beginnings, which is assisted transportation. So they outsource it.
What was the discussion around the barrier then that prevents, especially for our free and reduced lunch kids, to access the service?
It was robust, but in the end, they made a recommendation not to include transportation. The thought was that you currently have that same barrier for private providers.
Did we ever, and so I know you said that we didn't get a great participation from our private providers. Do we have any estimate on the number of kids that are currently in private preschool or in non-LSR7 preschools? If we're serving 311 and our average class is about 1260, right, of kindergartners, according to our own demographer, right? So we're somewhere in that vicinity. That means that there's 900 kids out there. I'm just using very ballpark numbers, right? That we would hope are entering into private preschools because we know that it's beneficial, but also then there's going to be obviously significant gaps and there's hundreds upon hundreds that we know probably aren't getting served. How are we trying to bridge that, I guess is what I'm trying to ask here, and how do we know if we're targeting is not the right word. How do we know that we're getting the kids that most need to get to LSR7?
So we're a little over 1,100 kids right now in kindergarten each year is where we're at now. But 300 plus that we're serving at Great Beginnings is 3 and 4-year-olds, so it's not all, so you can't subtract all 300. But I don't know, Dr. Mathis might have some, because we do coordinate with them with our Great Beginnings, but I don't know if we know full numbers, or Dr. Barger talked to several providers. Dr. Shelton has a family member who works in one of the providers. But I don't think we have there is no place to find all that data, Shelley, right, Ms. Sanders? No. Do you want to come up to the mic? Sure. You might be the best one to give a shot at this, but.
So I don't have exact numbers, but when we spoke to North Kansas City about this very issue, what they've done is created a quarterly coalition for early childhood where they actually meet with providers that are in the area as well as them and talk about issues that are facing. One thing they stressed was that due to the number of kids, so we think 1,100 kindergartners, there was no way for any of them to serve all of those kids. And so they depend on those private providers. Up there, Head Start is separate it's not in their district. They depend on Head Start because there's just no way that they can absorb all of those kids. And so they've just figured out a way to be more of a coalition to move that along because the reality is it's still a lot of kids and no one organization can serve all of them.
And I will add one of the things that our provider who did come talked about was that some students and private providers are removed and said you can't come back. We never do that.
Yep.
So there is a need for kids who do not qualify for early childhood special education or Title I or Head Start, which is majority of our kids pre-K. There is no guaranteed spot, and this would be a guaranteed spot for them.
And I hope everyone understands, I want preschool, so let's just end with that. But On that same note, when we talk about free and reduced lunch, what is going to be the qualifying measure or the timeline for them to be able to qualify for free and reduced lunch, still get enrolled then in time to start in a preschool? Because that's a tough time to get a hold of people, especially if they weren't considering preschool to begin with. How are we going to?
We have not developed a timeline because it's not approved yet. So the idea was we would have a timeline and then a due date so that we could do lottery in time to plan. So, but we have not done that part yet.
Okay, and then my last question, until other people probably say something that then I'll end up having to comment on, since that's what we talked about in the work session. My last question is, what's the scalability of this then? Like, let's say, for example, that this runs and it is wonderful. It's perfect. We get 9 classrooms in there and we still have kids that need placements. We still have kids in private that we know need placement. What's the scalability to increase it?
So the CAC's request is at CFMP. Of course, they're wrapping up, so it's kind of a late request for them. Consider a standalone building that could expand. So there is exactly 9 empty classrooms at Prairie View in the north end, and this will fill up all those 9 rooms. So it would not be expandable at that site, but their request is CFMP, consider pitching to the board a standalone special or early childhood education for pre-K.
Okay, I'm going to process that one. I might have another question about that here in a second. I'm good, thanks.
Okay, any Board Member Eslick.
Okay, I'm probably going to go a little bit of a different direction here. First of all, I really appreciate the work that was done to prepare all this information, and I know it was a tremendous amount of time for everyone involved. So I certainly want to give credit there. And I do think that pre-K is really important. I guess my concern is I want to make sure we as a board have vetted our priorities, and I was frankly like a little surprised that we kind of arrived at like this being a decision right now. I guess I kind of thought that we were going to have maybe a work session on it. But so it kind of caught me off guard that we were already kind of going this direction. So I'll start with that. So that's probably why I had like 8 pages of questions about the program, because I was just really curious more details and how we kind of arrived here. Because throughout the year we had talked about a number of different priorities for the district, and I must have missed the boat because I just didn't realize like how high this was for the rest of the board. So I'm certainly open to go whatever direction the board wants to go to. At the moment, like I just want to make sure that with this amount of money, almost $1 million the first year, and recurring expenses that really start at a little over $300,000, but that's going to increase because, you know, inflation. It's just the way it goes. That one, it's sustainable. That there's nothing that is higher priority that we are sacrificing to put this priority in place. And I'm not saying it's not a priority, it is, but we're a public entity with finite funds, so we have to prioritize where's this in the list of all the dream things that we want. We heard a number of them today, for example, that our students expressed as very high need and what I would consider high priority for the students we have today in our buildings. So I don't really have any questions. I guess to me, all of my questions have really already been answered, and I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not really ready to make a decision on this, so I just want to put that out there to the rest of the board. And it's not like I don't appreciate everything that's been done, nor do I think that this is not a priority. It is. I'm just in a kind of spot where I'm just not sure that this is the top priority, and that we have vetted it as a board as being like up there as the priority we should invest in right this minute, and what we're sacrificing in that process. So. Thanks.
I know that Vice President Foley pressed the button, but I just want to answer, I guess, your first initial concern on the statement of not knowing if this was a priority for the rest of the board. I don't necessarily know if it was a priority for the rest of the board. I think that this was something that came initially through a possibility of a grant of early childhood, and then possibly the district looking at other options to be able to support early childhood and expand. And so when Dr. Butt brought it to us, the board did not stop them. We told them to move forward. Ultimately, I guess my question, so ultimately, I think that it was direction from the full board on saying, hey, continue to go down this avenue. To Dr. Buck's point, when the CAC had the conversation with us, and we tasked the CAC to be able to basically, what do we want to tackle for them, and then this was the topic, and so now we have the urgency of being able to move forward. Now, I will say that I asked Dr. Buck the same question, well, what is the urgency? And I think in one of your questions that you submitted, the urgency is the hiring piece. If we're gonna have a domino effect of staff possibly wanting to come out of our other schools and then be an employee of at Prairie View for the early childhood program, then we have to be able to fill those spots. And so I think that's the urgency of making sure that we can be able to fill all of our full-time employee positions. The other piece to it, I will just say through conversation, was finances was a big piece of the conversation. So when we talked about Universal, which I will tell you, if we had exorbitant amount of money, Universal is what we would probably be discussing right now, because that is where that group was. I think that's where administration was. I think that's where I was personally, right, of being able to create more access for our earliest learners, because we know that data does support and prove that it does prohibit gaps from even existing. Right? And so if we know that is one of the fundamental bases that children need to be able to thrive through the educational system, then that is enough that's important for me to say that I want to see this move forward. Again, to your point, I move at the wishes of the board, right? And so we would have something we would have to agree upon. But I think when we, to even go back to our self-evaluation, we should be making decisions based on academics. What is the best decisions that we are charging Dr. Buck, and then Dr. Buck is charging his team to be able to produce highly educated young people? And so if early education is the platform and the avenue that Dr. Buck and his team sees fit, I think that we should support it. That's my position. I think that if there's other things that the Board of Education need to look at to also aid successful academic outcomes, we need to support that too. So ultimately, when we look at where we're at, I will tell you the reason why the CMFP conversation came up was because ultimately it is the desire of the CAC to see it bigger than even what we're currently doing. But we also understand, because we're limited with finances, we have to be able to play this balancing game, right, of being able to meet needs of students, be able to hope that we were going to see the outcomes that we're expecting. And so to your point, when you say that we currently have needs for students that are currently in our schools, I agree. However, if we don't attack them at a very young age, of being able to get them in a classroom where they can learn, and to be able to eliminate some of the barriers that do exist for a lot of our families that cannot afford private child care or whatever that may be, then we're gonna always have these issues. The last thing that I'll say, and then I'll yield, is when we talk about the academic component, which Dr. Buck did not talk about, which I'm a little, no, but the curriculum that is going to be taught to these kids also was a very heavy conversation. And so I think it's important to truly give the committee and the team, the administration, the credit that I truly believe that they did a great job vetting every opportunity and what was reasonable. And then, of course, Dr. Shelton and Nathan Holt, Mr. Holder, I think they did a great job articulating the fact that we can't have everything that we want, right? And ultimately, the two recommendations that came before the committee, neither one of those recommendations really was adopted, or even was before us. What the team decided to do was that hybrid of basically 2 models where we were providing full day and half day. And again, that goes back to those barriers and trying to eliminate those barriers. And so I'll yield for if there's any other discussion, but I just want to assure the full board, and I appreciate the support around this topic. I really do. I support it, and I'm hearing what everyone is saying, but trust me, trust Board Member Miller that we made sure that every opinion, every thought, everything that could get thought about was in that room. Ultimately, when this recommendation came, me and Board Member Miller did not weigh in. And ultimately, I shared with the rest of the members because they were like, why aren't y'all telling us what y'all want? And I told them because I will have my day to be able to share what my thoughts were. And ultimately, this is not what I supported on the day, but I am most definitely supportive of being able to move forward with this recommendation because of the process that I actually got to see play out from start to finish. Thank you.
Can I just respond really quick? I know Board Member Foley, you were going to say something. Okay, I acknowledge all of that. I just want to say I am not. Don't confuse my question about where this priority lands as me questioning the thoroughness and the capability of the committee, because that is not what I'm getting at. I have full faith and confidence that this committee's heart was exactly where it was supposed to be, that they did everything that they were supposed to do in terms of vetting, and probably more than what we would have reasonably expected to vet all the options. I don't have any question about that. My question is more like pulling back. Is this the priority that the board is focused on in lieu of any other things that we could spend the money on? I guess is my question. That was really my curiosity about where this lands. And I understand, I remember the meeting with the CAC. I think when I was in that meeting, I think my interpretation of that interaction was explore this, let's talk about it. I did not realize it was explore this, put a plan together, we'll approve it. So it was just probably a little bit of a misinterpretation of that whole interaction. So that's why it was a little bit more surprising to me. But again, it's not that I don't support its existence or the possibility of having pre-K. It's just timing, resources. Is this the right thing for right now? That was really more of my position. So thank you for clarifying all that.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comments. So I would actually take that question, and sorry, Dr. Buck, to put you on the spot, but is this what the board should be wrestling with, of being able to address concerns that you and your team see for LSR7?
Pre-K is definitely a benefit to our community, and pre-K expansion is definitely a benefit to our community. We've talked to employers about this as well. It came up in a legislative meeting not that long ago. It is definitely a concern for employment reasons. We were talking to one employer that they had they were losing an employee because she could not find daycare. She didn't know she needed to find a spot before she thought about getting pregnant. Because there's just such long wait lists. So she's tried to find one in her 3rd trimester and couldn't, and so she was leaving the workforce. So we hear this at the state level as well. And you're right, there's academic benefits, and the group did dig into that, and they looked at what happened in Tulsa versus what happened in Tennessee. We did talk about different models and what would be appropriate. We did talk to North Kansas City about that as well. There is benefit. I think everybody knows the benefits there. So I didn't really want to bring that piece up, but you're 100% right on that. But yes, and it was a priority of Ms. Sanders. We wanted to, there was a grant this year, $50,000 per classroom. We think it'll be there next year. But it's not included in this because we can't guarantee it'll be there. And if it's there, then we would have $450,000 grant we could apply for to help offset this. But I just can't, we found out late summer this year that was available. And that's where we started exploring, hey, can we just have 2 classrooms mid-year? Then we end up all right, we're probably doing this too quickly. We need to be thoughtful. Let's put together a Pratt and study that. Then the board and the CAC were like, we're interested in this too. So I think that's where that came from. I think the CAC steering committee who was at the meeting definitely thought they needed to study it and make a recommendation. So if they misunderstood, I'm sure they feel bad about that, but that's what they took from that. We need to make a recommendation.
Is there any other questions? Vice President Foley, sorry.
Yes, thank you. So as board members, we are tasked with being stewards of our district. And looking at these numbers, I see, $824,000 in the first year for 220 students. That will drop to $334,000. Mind you, that's not taking into consideration any grants. And although I know the value of pre-K and what it can provide to our students, I would just ask going forward, because I don't think I will be a board member at the time that all this goes through and this is happening and that we see the results from this. But I would just love to see our district put the data out there to show how these students that went through pre-K are affected in their education, and how it is benefiting them, so that the citizens in the community that might balk at these numbers will then later see the value and how it improves education and how it closes the achievement gap.
Thank you for those comments. Board Member Murdoch.
To give a couple last comments here. Number one, Vice President Foley, that's an excellent point, but I think one of the great things we would be able to point out to our community is that that's going to be $1,500 a kid. We spend obviously significantly more than that in terms of elementary and middle and high school, so I think that will be able to show a good ROI, essentially, is what I'm trying to say in terms of that, if that is indeed what the final surplus deficit is. That's the number I'm going off of, by the way, not the total program cost, okay? The second thing, though, President Sparks, that I would like to at least recommend, and I don't know how we can do this, so I do want to be very clear on this. I don't like the transportation piece. I'm just being perfectly honest with you. I think that we need to have some kind of transportation offering if it is available, right? So I don't know how you put this into the recommendation and or wording to make sure that it is known that the board, if the district can provide transportation in some capacity, we do so. I'm really struggling with the idea that we're going to require the transportation. Yeah, go ahead.
So I can tell you all committee members really would like to have transportation. The cost and can you guarantee we do it was probably the barrier for them. Again, he said he did. I also didn't vote on anything. I just sat here on the mic saying, all right, next 10 minutes you're doing it. Mr. Holder or Dr. Shelton, do you have at your fingertips what the cost would be for transportation? Because we had a number at that one meeting, what it would be, but again, that was by a certain size scales. This is 9 classrooms. I don't think we had a 9 classroom model, so we'll have to extrapolate a little bit. And if we remember, when we did assisted transportation, I can't remember, it was about triple what we cost doing it ourselves. So whatever number he gives you, if we were outsourcing it because we couldn't meet the need, triple it.
And I'll just add, and then please weigh in, Board Member Miller, that not only was cost a conversation, but the logistics of timing of these students with being on the bus, because they're coming from all over our district into the one school, and that was kind of where that conversation also happened with wanting the individual sites. But then when you looked at the cost analysis to that too, then that kind of is where the hybrid models kind of came up.
And I'm just envisioning the first person who's going to come up to us and say, I would love to do your program, but I have no way to get my kid there. That's the first thing that's in my head right now. So sorry.
Member Miller.
I was just going to say that, as everybody has said, that was a huge consideration that was talked about ad nauseum. One of the things that was brought up that I think is important to also share in our conversations was that this is something that this is something that we're thinking about growing, right? And so this would be kind of the first phase of it, and that you, at some point down the road, if we could manage the transportation piece, then that could be added on. One thing that was shared was that, you can start out with no transportation and then add it on, but you can't start with transportation and then take it away. So that's kind of one of the other pieces that was discussed as well.
Well, and that's why I just want to make sure that the board is giving clear direction to staff that if it becomes feasible, even in this first year, we'll do it, right? Like, I mean, I believe firmly in making that kind of commitment that if we're going to do this, you do it right. I mean, that's, and if we're going to be servicing free and reduced lunch kids, if we're going to be charging tuition to people to come to the school, then if it is viable for us to provide the transportation, we need to do that. And so I'm just gonna end with two last things here. The first thing is, what is our current average classroom size for Great Beginnings?
I don't know average. I know the max. Do you know the
Is-
average? Dr. Mathis will
It's
come
gonna
up
it's gonna depend on the special education
on the
status of
program.
the students, right?
Whether you're life, let me go back to that, whether you're life or Title I or Head Start. Oh goodness, where am I at? There, oh, I just went past it. So each one of these will have a different max, but I don't know average off the top of my head.
Yeah, our title classrooms typically have 15-ish. Head Start has a required number. I think they are at 17 per classroom. And then our early childhood special education classrooms, the blended rooms, they might have peers, but they also have developmental delays that are identified. Those classrooms typically wouldn't go over like 12. I think we try to stay around there, and Jeannie and Sarah may be saying that's not quite right, but I think that's close. But some of our special programs like Life and Stars, we would keep very small, like 6 and under.
Right. And the reason I ask is 20 the correct number per classroom? Because that's what we're at, right?
Yes.
That's what the
So
number
there would
is.
be 3 adults for 20. Right now, when we talk to providers, there's 2 adults per 20.
Okay.
And our providers we visited with. Am I saying that right? And allows for 20. Yep. Shelley, you want to come say that on the microphone?
The state allows up to 20.
Okay, but we would have three professionals in the room, right?
I guess I should say 2.5, because one will float from 2 classrooms back and back.
Okay.
Sans 1, because it doesn't work out with 9 to have even numbers. So one would have 3, and the rest of them would have 2.5. And most of our providers are having 2
Okay.
throughout the day.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And then my last thing is, because you kind of said we did just kind of pull it out of a hat, is the tuition rate, right? So a 200, 100 model. Again, same kind of concern, right, is going to come from my perspective of those people who won't be free and reduced lunch, who are going to see, obviously, I mean, 200 a week for 4 weeks, I mean, that's a chunk, right? That's a chunk. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a chunk if they tried to go to private, but that's one of the reasons that sometimes they don't go anywhere. And so I guess ultimately, this kind of goes to Board Member Eslick's point here of how quickly this has come before us here in terms of some of the questions that then we end up having. What is the flexibility around us approving the recommendation today, but then altering how we can go about administration of the program? Maybe that's the best way to share this, because I support obviously expanding the pre-K. I want to do that, but I also want to have the flexibility as a board, and for those of you who are still here in a few months, where do you go with it come fall if you have the opportunity to be flexible and to make changes? Where are we going to be at with that?
Dr. Buck, I want you to answer that question, but I just want to make sure that we're all clear that only 2 of the 9 classrooms are going to be tuition-based.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
I understand
okay,
that,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
And so, before I answer that, and I may have you repeat it because I want to find this information, because I'm trying to find, I think it's lower than any of the other districts who have tuition classrooms. I was trying to find that real quick. But there's just 3 providers, I won't say their names out loud. One's 264 for 4-year-olds, another one's 230, and another one was 200. And so I think that's why Dr. Shelton just picked the number 200. But I think 200 is also lower than our neighbors that we pulled data from, Shelley, or Ms. Andrews. am I
And
correct?
I'm not as concerned about that portion. What I'm concerned about is that number is still the barrier to people entering into preschool, because they either A, don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, or B, don't want to qualify for free and reduced lunch, which is a very real issue as well. So that's why I'm asking the final question here is, what's our flexibility to essentially mold this program going into the fall if we make the approval today?
Whatever you can always come back and amend your approval. Remember 2020 fall when we talked about what we're going to do with our closure and all that? We came back and amended it many times.
That's a dark period, Dr.
That's
Buck, to bring up
so
to me.
Your last vote
That's
is
good.
what stands. That's what I'll
good.
say to that.
That's a nice way to shut me down right there. I'll just...
I think Ms. Sanders wanted to add to that too, I think.
So North Kansas City actually had 2 tuition-based scales. There was a different scale for employees, kids, and there was a different pay scale for non-employee kids. And so just that was something that factored in, but the rates that you have up there are lower than what they have, and I don't think that they provided half-day tuition-based. It was all full day.
Okay.
And those kids got access to before and after school too.
Okay. Which I'm assuming, is that available?
Anything's available. Blue Springs also has different rates for staff and non-staff. And I just pulled it up, I thought. I can't see the exact amount on this, but they have a different amount for each of that too. So they dedicate, I think North Kansas City dedicated a classroom for staff, classroom not for staff, or maybe it was Blue Springs. You could just stay up here, Miss Anders.
They couldn't go, so their commitment to the Board of Education is they can't go over 80 slots. So no matter how much they expand, there's only 80 slots that are designated for tuition base. All the other slots are based on free and reduced lunch status.
And I think they divided those 80 slots between staff and non-staff.
Yes, 40-40.
Okay. Well, then, I appreciate all the information, and I'll be supportive tonight, but I want everybody to continue to work on how we can make it as accessible as possible. That's my overarching comment.
So can we have a motion, and let me make this statement. The commitment would be, if it's the wish of the board, let's approve this. If the ask is to continue to have conversation around this topic, then we can do that. What we want to be able to do is allow all entities of our district to start preparation and to also allow hiring to start happening if that is where we are as a board and we approve a motion. But if there's specifics around amounts and things of that nature, those conversations can still happen. If we have the numbers, Dr. Shelton, even on transportation or stuff like that, if those are things that we still want to talk about on what those offerings, I believe those conversations can still continue. Correct, Dr. Buck?
That is correct. And I want to correct myself. Blue Springs is actually $200 a week, the same as Dr. Shelton put on there. I don't think that's why I put on there. And they cut off $25 for staff. It's $175 for full day for a week for staff. And I think they had 40 spots. They didn't have a ton of spots. They have a long waiting list for their tuition ones.
Okay. So do I have a motion?
I mean, I'm happy to do it here because I respect that we could continue this if we need to. I move to approve the expansion of the pre-K classrooms as recommended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Linda.
Board Member Eslick,
I don't feel ready to make this decision, and it's not a no because I don't support pre-K, but I can't support this in its current form. So at the moment, I'm going to vote no.
Vice President Foley,
Aye.
Board Member Johnson. Aye. Board Member Garrett.
I was also wanting to hold off for another time to be able to discuss more about this. As so many different moving parts, I would still like to continue talking about it. So no, sorry.
Thank you.
Board Member Murdoch.
Aye.
President Sparks.
Aye.
Board Member Miller.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. That'll be 5-2.
All right, our next item is 8.01 Diploma Plus Program Evaluation Presentation, and we have Ms. Shannon Booth coming to the microphone.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. My name is Shannon Booth. I have the pleasure of being the Director of Career Education for the district, and I'm here tonight to talk about our Diploma Plus program. Diploma Plus is a K-12 program that infuses career exploration into the learning experience throughout the entire K-12 journey. with the ultimate goal of our students graduating with a market value asset and a plan for their future. We are aligned with the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, specifically Action Plan 1.3, 1.6, and 3.2. We are also in alignment with the Board of Education's goal of increasing market value asset attainment from last year's attainment of 79% to this year, hopefully getting to that 85% mark. We also abide by Perkins 5 federal accountability standards and MSIP 6. The district, state, and federal funds used within the Diploma Plus program total $1,515,376. That combines career and technical education funds, all real-world learning funding, all district local funds, and any other CTE grants that we write throughout the year. The big portion of that funding goes to making sure that our equipment is industry standard equipment in all of our career and technical education classrooms at all 4 middle schools, all 3 high schools, and Summit Technology Academy. We engage with our stakeholders on a regular basis, including students, parents, community, business and industry, our own career education department, higher education, local, state, and federal government, as well as local and regional strategic partners. Those stakeholders help with us in our planning process. They partner with us in our planning process. We come up with a comprehensive local needs assessment every 2 years, career pathway advisory meetings for each program area at least twice a year, career education department meeting regularly. We sit on the Lee Summit Workforce Alliance, the Lee Summit Chamber Education Committee, the Lee Summit Visitors Bureau, and work with Kaufman and the real world learning communities. In addition to our stakeholders being a part of all of those programs, they also help us to make sure that we are meeting our federal requirements, and we measure up on the following standards that are listed here, including participation enrollment, post-program retention and placement, industry recognized credentials and market value asset attainment, non-traditional program concentration, making sure that we are in alignment with labor market needs, and then expanding our business partner and community engagement. One area where we are measured federally is the Perkins 5 federal accountability. The 8 standards listed here, we report data on an annual basis. Currently, LSR7 meets all of those standards. One area that our department is tasked with is also the graduate follow-up survey. We are tasked to survey our graduates 180 days after they graduate. What you see here in this pie chart are our 2023 graduate results. I'm happy to announce that we were able to find data on 97% of the graduates that graduated last year, which is amazing. And the other 3% you'll find in the other category in this data. Last year, our 2023 MBA's attainment, the graduates attained, 79% of them attained 1 or more market value asset. That's up from 73% in 2022 and 50% in 2021. There are so many celebrations. It was really hard to come up with this small amount, but I'm gonna go for it. So we have national champions that in our cybersecurity class at Summit Technology Academy. This group of students you see pictured here went to the MoreNet Cyber Challenge and won. Lee Summit High School just had an amazing Plan Your Future Day where we had 30 business and industry partners and 20 post-secondary partners come and help talk to our students about planning for their future. We have real-world learning student ambassadors at all 3 high schools. They're interning with the Kaufman and Startland Foundations to help spread the word of market value asset attainment and real-world learning to their peers. We have increased our special education internships from 18 last year to 30 placements this year, and we even have a few that ended in full-time employment at the end of last year. Professional nursing internships, we were able to place 28 students in professional nursing internships this year with St. Luke's and Children's Mercy. We have numerous real-world learning experiences happening like build zones and vehicle fairs, career curriculum in the middle school and high schools, and all of the market value assets that are happening on a regular basis in all of our classrooms. And then we had the pleasure of placing teachers in teacher externships this program if they were enrolled in our real world learning professional learning pathways. There's always room for improvement, and as we look at the data,
Can you do a proud parent moment? Go back to previous slide. Who's that young lady on the left?
that blonde is my daughter, Sophie. I'm super proud of her. She got up at Union Station for our business partner recognition event, and in front of 600 people, got up on that stage and presented an award like she was born to do it. So it was really exciting to see those students shine that day. Areas of improvement, the Career Education Department has identified subgroups of special population students who seem to still have some barriers to market value asset attainment. So intentional work will be allocated to all the areas identified as having that need. We will continue to look at data every single year and make improvements to be as effective as we can for students. And as we evaluate our performance, we ask how can the Career Education Department continue to strengthen Career Navigator role and support, expand and enhance business partnerships, integrate real-world learning and career education into curriculum, improve our communication, enhance our professional learning on real-world learning and career education, and embed essential skills into MBA experiences. And the next few slides just talk about our action steps and how we plan to achieve those goals. So at this time, does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Board, is there any questions on this presentation? Dr. Buck?
One of the board members asked me earlier about your dual credit. Can you make a connection then? You'll have to do this at another time and provide to the board. How many of those kids who earned the dual credit part of MVA actually went to college the next year? I assume you could match up that 180-day with that. I know you can't do it off the top of your head, but
yes.
that was a curiosity. Thank you.
I can absolutely do that. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, I have two.
Okay.
So on number one, on page 10 of the presentation, can you give us the definition of other?
I sure can. So other are students who are not in any of the other areas or that we did not hear from.
Okay. Can you give an example of?
I am taking a gap year.
Okay.
I don't know what I want to do, so I'm living at home.
Okay, perfect. And then on page 13, when we're looking at the opportunities for improvement, can you share what where the gaps are?
Sure. I'm going to go back to the chart, the data here. We've identified some areas in our free and reduced lunch population where we need to do a better job of figuring out why those students haven't obtained MBAs or are having some barriers. So we have some intentional work planned around identifying those students, figuring out what's going on, and making sure that we're talking to them and that we are providing those opportunities. We also have some at-risk areas that we feel we can improve some opportunities as well. And not really special population, but we've identified areas like fine arts and IB, where we need to really think through what a market value asset looks like for kids that are doing some of those activities, because they are absolutely getting the skills that we would use to define a market value asset. So that's another goal of our team, to continue to work and expand that way.
Can you define at risk for us?
At risk, students who are maybe not excelling with grades or aren't involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, are struggling with school. How can we better support them to make sure that they are in some of these activities?
Okay. This is another ask that I would have. If we could, while I appreciate the demographics breakouts, if there are other areas, if you can provide the disaggregated of those particular, so like a free of reduced lunch, and then if you can break that out to subgroups for us,
Okay.
is that possible?
I think so.
Okay.
I have to look at the numbers.
Okay, all right, perfect. Is there any other questions? All right, thank you so much. I appreciate this
Thank you.
report.
Before we get to number 9, I want to point out we still have 3 student reps that stayed the whole meeting. And they're going above and beyond, so kudos. Our next, or 4, sorry, 4. We have, next is items of information, written reports 9.01 to 9.07.
Okay, is there any discussion on any of the written reports?
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Eslick.
I would like to talk about 9.02, the winter NWEA data.
Okay, who can talk to that?
Dr. Barger
It might
or
be
Ms.
more of a
Jones?
board conversation, but of course, Dr. Barger is welcome to come up, but.
Okay.
So I had asked a number of questions kind of about our data, certainly around some decline that seemed to be apparent from the results. So one of the questions that I asked was just like an overall observation about the decline in our math achievement percentiles, that was really like from grade level, from 3rd grade to 8th grade, that there seemed to be kind of a pattern of decline in our performance. And so one of the responses that I received back from Dr. Barger was regarding the achievement gap that resulted from the pandemic. And so one of the things that she had mentioned was that average 3rd grade student will need 1.6 additional months of schooling to reach pre-pandemic levels. And by 8th grade, that increases to 9.1 additional months of schooling. So I guess my question to the board is how we want to try to figure out how to address something like that, because if that's the reality, and I realize we do better, that's the other caveat in there, you know, our achievement levels are better than average when it comes to pre and post pandemic, if I'm capturing that accurately. That was the response that I had received. But that's the gap is obviously still there, and the decline is obviously still present from 3rd to 8th grade, and I know our intervention levels are different. One of the responses I received was that elementary students are able to have the MTSS process address their gaps, and then in middle school they have math lab, because we're specifically talking about the math achievement levels here. So these results were concerning to me, which is why I asked a lot of questions. So I suppose I do have one question then, since that I just kind of, after reading the results of my initial questions. So with Math Lab, is that a class? And if that is a class, how many students can it serve? And are there students who need that class who aren't able to access it?
Yeah, I'd say I think that would be a more Dr. Hertzler question than me.
But while he's coming up, Dr. Jones is the one who answered your questions, Dr.
Okay,
Barger. I want to give him full credit.
Sorry about that.
So Math Lab is a class. It's a class at the middle school level and the high school level. Middle school is designed to provide support for students who need support in math, like you're talking about. Can students get into it? Yes. They're identified based on the data you're talking about of needing that support, and they get that. Each of our 4 middle schools can provide, gosh, the number of sections, if at least 1 full FTE devoted to math labs, so 6 sections of math lab, and then 2 of our middle schools have 9 sections they can offer. So we can offer numerous sections of math lab to support those students.
So there's no student who would need it who's not able to enroll in that?
I don't believe so. I don't know that. I mean, just right off the top of my head, I don't know that. But I don't believe we have an issue where students can't get into it because we don't have the space for it.
Okay, so are they
Same is true.
required to? Like if they perform in a level where that need is there, are they then required to do that? Or is
They're
that
not required
parent
to
initiated?
because they have to lose a class to take it.
Okay.
And it's the same at the high school level. When you get into reading lab and math lab, an elective course has to be taken out of their schedule to add in reading and math support labs. Now, do parents typically take advantage of that? Yes, they do, but they're not required to do that.
So it's typically a parent-driven decision?
It's a school-driven decision in terms of providing that information to parents, and then it's a partnership on deciding whether or not they take the course.
Okay. So if we have family or students who maybe have less engaged parents not pushing for that, then a student who might
No, the
need
push
support isn't getting it?
The push comes from the school. The school is the one pushing it initially.
Okay.
Parents are usually more involved. Sorry. Parents are usually more involved. Parents are usually more involved and want their kids in those electives. That's where you get pushback. Pushback on that.
It's okay.
That's VIP service there.
Yeah.
Dr. Carlson's always taking care of people. HR department always taking care of folks. So I would say the more involved parents typically are the ones who want their students to stay in those elective courses. But I would say no matter how involved a parent is, if we go to them and say there's a need for support in reading and math, they will listen. They will absolutely listen to us and partner with us as long as they see progress happening for their students. So I don't think we get a lot of pushback where they say, no, we're not doing this. I will say that does shift in the high school, though, some. We do see in the high school level parents pushing back and saying, well, I understand they might need that support, but I want them in choir, I want them in band, I want them in, you name it. And they make a choice at that point. Middle school is not as much.
That was going to be a follow-on question because we see these test results in 8th grade, and honestly, the 8th grade test results are probably the most concerning, I guess, to me. So after they leave 8th grade, they go to 9th grade. What tests are they taking since we don't do NWEA in high school? So how do we know that?
Algebra 1 does do NWEA.
Okay.
So Algebra 1 is still doing that and using that information. All 9th grade students, the vast majority of 9th grade students in math move into Algebra 1. And then there are math labs that are associated with Algebra 1 to help support those students there if they're identified as needing that support in 9th grade. Same is true in geometry. There's a math lab support in geometry and a math lab support in Algebra 2.
So Algebra 1 students are taking the NWEA?
They are.
Why don't we have those scores?
As freshmen.
Yes, freshmen.
As
High
freshmen.
school students still take the NWEA.
Right.
But it's,
The 8th graders who are in Algebra 1 do not take the NWA, correct?
yes.
They do.
Because it's listed in here that they did not take it, just as an FYI, in our
Yeah,
report.
we only have results to 8th grade, and
Right.
So I think Dr. Jones, I think the request is some deliverables. If you have the Algebra 1 scores from NWA, they would like to see those.
Yeah, I can send the difference between the Algebra 1 test and then the Math 6+ test that 6th through 8th graders take is the fact that there are ongoing tests from fall, winter, spring of multiple years. So a lot of the measures that you get with that NWA 6+ test, those growth scores, those long-term projectile ranges, things like that, those are available because they have the buildup of scores over those years. With the Algebra 1, we have the three for that window. We don't, and so NWA doesn't provide a lot of the same data in the same way that it does for the growth. But I can go back, I did include some information in their report of what was available, but I can go back and try to provide as much of a comparative breakdown for Algebra 1 as you guys receive for the 6+ math.
And Board Member Esco, I don't mean to jump in on here, but if the 420 kids that took the NWEA were a part of the 8th grade scores, we would see scores most likely around the 7th, right? I mean, is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, we can assume that, I can't tell you about what the percentile would be, but we can assume those scores would increase simply because the rigor of the Algebra 1 NWA is higher than the Math 6+ that of NWA. And the way I know that is because when you look at this, there are some crossover standards, and essentially how NWA works is they rate the RIT score that kids get is measuring the difficulty of the questions.
Right.
And so standards in Math 6+ are rated a higher RIT score than those same exact standards are on the algebra test, which saying that this is an easier concept for an algebra test that kids should master versus those if they are taking just the 6+ version of it all. So yeah, we can just kind of assume that they would do better on it.
Okay. Sorry, Board Member Esco.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think ultimately what would help me, and I don't know if the rest of the board is interested in this sort of information, but when we look at NWEA, I would find it really helpful to track a class, if that makes sense. Like, what was this class in 2nd grade to 3rd grade to 4th? Are they improving, like a growth track? And I know we don't always have the same students. We have some students leave, new students come in, but just like in general, maybe we get 80% of that class has been, there in Lee Summit the whole time. I don't know if that's something that's useful, but to understand how a class progresses and whether they're growing, to me, that would be useful information to gain from NWEA to understand overall how they started and how it's going.
We can certainly provide a cohort follow along. They will, The 2020s when they set these norms, so before that was a different set of norms.
Yeah.
At some point, they're gonna change them again. So we could do it for several years while they keep the same norms. We also know math gets more complex, so you may the concepts this grade. Next grade, there's new concepts. And we,
But still in reading as well. I mean,
yes,
both of
100%.
them.
So it won't be apples to apples, but we can certainly provide that.
That would be helpful.
And but individual students are getting those reports now, yes?
Yes,
Right? I mean,
yes,
I
as a
mean, we get
parent,
'em, right?
as a parent, I see
get
'em.
'em, right? So, okay, yeah. I'll be quiet.
So can I ask you?
Yeah.
Are you thinking that that's not helpful information to have?
It
like,
is.
or-
It is helpful information for me as an individual parent. I don't necessarily know as a tracking mechanism of one particular cohort of how the board would be able to interpret those results based on the kids that are actually taking the test, because it's going to be so different. It's going to be based on the different level of questions that kids are getting, based on the right answers even as they're going along the test. So I think where you're headed though, and to your point of what we really want to see is we want to see the individual growth. So what is the education piece that needs to be done to make sure that parents and students are actually seeing the progress on those reports, interpreting it correctly? And I know we try to do that, but probably even more of it so that they know what supports are out there if their student is struggling, that kind of thing. I think would probably be a little bit more beneficial, especially as we put more emphasis on the NWEA and move and take away some of the emphasis from MAP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever measures we can put in place to make sure that there are supports, not only for students, but for parents to understand the results and get the supports that might be necessary for their students. I think anything that we continue to accelerate in that realm would be very, very beneficial. I don't think tracking a cohort is a bad idea. I'm just not sure that you're going to get what you want out of it. That's the only thing
That's fair.
that I would
That's
say.
why I
So,
asked.
yeah.
Because I knew there was
So-
something ruminating in there, and I wanted to know what was bouncing around. So, really, I mean, I don't know how to crack the nut. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But what would be helpful to me is to be able to understand how our students are growing. And sometimes this data can be confusing. We talked about this today. Like RIT scores, I still don't understand that. If you asked me to explain that, I would just eyes glaze over. Don't know. But when I see numbers like in math, our school growth percentile being like 36% for fourth grade, that sounds really bad to me. That looks really bad to me. So I'm like, well, what are we doing about that? So, when we see numbers like that, to me, I'm like, what's our plan? And I realize, some of the explanation at the bottom of some of this is, well, we're pretty matched with national averages, and okay, but it still looks kind of 36 doesn't sound very good. So
Yeah, understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for clarification, the best way to remember what RIT score is it's just a number that's saying how difficult, it measures the difficulty of questions the kids answered correct. I'll test you next time.
Yeah, right. But then I'm like, in comparison to what? Like, what's a 6 mean? Is it out of 10, out of 100? Like, what?
Well, yeah, that's the hard part of it is there's no
Exactly, there's no
how
anchor.
we know within our words of those ratings and pieces like that. It's a very variable, and so it's really hard to just know it out of
I need
context
A,
like
B,
that.
C, D, E, F.
Yeah.
Like, I need letters. Like, give me it's too confusing. That's the part
That's very fair.
Okay, well, thank you.
No, I can work on that. Yeah.
I appreciate your questions, Board Member Eslick. So, something that she kind of started going down a track of is we have math labs that ultimately are optional, right? They're recommended, but they're optional. Are there any other supports that are available for students that are struggling other than math lab?
So supports for students that struggle. So the systemic, like embedded within the school day supports, you've got obviously your two classes you mentioned, reading lab and math lab. The other piece though is teacher-led interventions with students. So teachers determining where students need assistance and working with them. Interventions that happen during the school day in our high schools and middle schools, yes, those exist. They're just not courses they would take. They happen during other times, whether it's your Titan time, Bronco time, Tiger time, and then all your middle school, same things. Interventions that are designed to help students move forward.
So as a district, how are we measuring the success of those options?
So those options, so I can speak to the high school level specifically. How we measure typically the effectiveness of a intervention time at the high school is your failure rate. like reducing our students' failure rate in courses, and our high schools are keeping track of that data of moving students' grades forward, up, okay, using that time, and they've got data to show that that time is effective. Because it takes time from courses. If you take that time and carve it out and have an intervention time during your day, which all of our schools do, then that time has to come from somewhere, and it comes from your courses. So instead of having 50-minute class periods, you reduce down to 47 minutes to create that time. So you want to make sure it's being effective, because otherwise you just put the time back into your classes. And so our schools have data to show that failure rates, they've been able to affect that. They've been able to improve grades in courses based on that time.
So is that data that we can be provided as a board to be able to?
I'm sure our schools we can get it and provide it to you.
Okay, I think that would be great, because I do appreciate Board Member Eslick's line of questioning on wanting to, and even as a full board, this was a perfect day for all this to happen, because I think it goes in line with what we're trying to do as a board of really what is it that we should be looking at to measure the success that we're having, especially when we do see scores that are national percentiles, they would look not so appealing to the eye. My other question is this: why do we necessarily always compare to the national average and not to maybe the Big Six?
I don't know if we have all Big Six taking NWA nor access to their data. NWA, and by the way, this is national percentile if we were pre-pandemic, because that's when the standards were created. It was created in the 1920 school year and released out in 2020, about when the pandemic started. So this is if we were pre-pandemic and there wasn't an impact of learning from what percentile would be. So it's not true of what percentile would be this year. Whereas when we could do that with state map testing, because we can see everybody's scores. So that's a unique part of NWA, but I don't think we have a state, they don't even provide a state report, do they?
No, we don't, but I would say that as we begin the work through the Success Ready Student Network, through the SDZ zone, the waiver work that we're doing, we're part of a 20 districts, and one of the 4 assessments, largely the largest number of the 20 of us, I'm probably guessing 9, 10, maybe 11 of the 20 districts utilize NWEA. So when we talk about the Success Ready Student Network dashboard, in which we'll be communicating our scores as a replacement for the APR, it'll become more readily available for us to compare to the other SRSN districts as it relates to NWEA. And to Ms. Essex' question, it had me sort of thinking that potentially there might be some value down the road, particularly as we enter the SRSN, in sort of a more comprehensive NWEA 101. Why is the 50th percentile the target? That seems kind of weird. Like, just sort of what is a RIT, so that we all can really have a deep understanding of what we're looking at and help you guys feel comfortable with what we're bringing you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Dr. Johnson?
So like having math labs, are there any formal or structured peer-to-peer tutoring programs for math in any of the schools?
So structured peer-to-peer happens through A+. Some of that happens there. But outside of A+, I wouldn't say you have structured peer-to-peer tutoring programs that take place during our school days. The tutoring programs that we have typically come from teachers in those departments. So you'd have perhaps individual teachers working with their students to help them, but many schools also have one teacher who is available each day to help students in any of the classes. One math teacher available for any students who need help. One English teacher available for any students who need help before school, after school. And then, like I said, during those intervention times, all of the teachers are available and can assign students to come to them.
And the reason I asked, I think there's something to say about when a peer is teaching you and showing you maybe how to do something versus the student and how the information is received. I do see value in peer-to-peer tutoring, so I was just curious.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Herksaw, you brought up something that came up with Dr. Johnson's question. For students that are not able to do before and after school, because I know a lot of times, even for my personal child, right, there's sacrifices that me and mom have to make in order to get my child to school at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning before school starts, or perhaps staying late. Is there another way
That's why we offer that intervention time I mentioned. So that is embedded within the school day. So it's roughly 30 minutes of time where teachers can assign students, but students can also seek out teachers for help during that time too. So for students who don't have the ability before and after school, that's why that time exists during the day.
Is it allowing you to have that one-on-one? Because a lot of times if you have a full class and if a teacher is, assigned to 15, 20 students, then you might not, you get helped, but it may not be the type of help that that particular child really needs.
Yeah. It may be one-on-one, but it very likely might not be as well.
Correct.
It's very difficult to provide one-on-one tutoring during the day with, I'm just going to use an example, 16 math teachers in a high school and 1,900 students. But trying to offer one-on-one help during the day isn't necessarily feasible, but there is also a possibility that during that intervention time, a teacher can still have an individual conversation with a student about their work. That can still happen and does happen.
And I would agree with you that happens. I think the point that I'm trying to make, and this would go along with, I think a point that Board Member Essick was trying to make earlier, is if tutoring one-on-one is a need, or there's other things that we could do to support our students in their learning, then I'm charging administration to look at what are other opportunities that could be available.
We were looking at, and I think there ended up being some hiccups with it, of outsourcing of called varsity tutoring, but I think there was some issues with that. But we were actually going down the same road. Like, all right, how can we add yet another layer to that? So we ended up having some roadblocks with that this year, but we are very interested in that as well.
Okay. I think that's great conversation, and if there's no other questions, thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
Our last item is 10.01 public comments.
I wasn't done yet.
So sorry.
I'm
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I still have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Not about that line, sorry. You don't have to. You are good. You're good. You did fantastic. It's actually about 9.07 Special Services Department Program Evaluation.
Okay. Who's going to be responsible?
Dr. Mathis is coming
Okay.
up.
Bring your own water with you, Dr. Mathis.
Dr. Carlson's a great delivery, though, so we're good.
I'm usually pretty well hydrated, they'll tell you. I'm a water pusher.
Okay, so I had asked about this earlier in our board questions anyway, but I wanted to talk about it here because I'm still kind of, even after the information that was provided to me, I still have some questions. So the question that I had asked was regarding the, under the upcoming evaluation questions on the presentation, number 3, which says, can we decrease the number of students who are not white qualifying for special education to align with total enrollment? So one of the documents that you had sent to me was regarding Special Education Part B State Performance Plan Indicators, and you sent that, and I'm just refreshing in case my fellow board members have not read the questions. But what you had said was that this is one of the targets, that number 3 relates to one of the targets that's on the performance plan. And it does, but I think my question is, I think one of the statements that's in here is missing from number 3, and that's really my question on why that's not present. And so one of the performance indicators referencing non-white students would be % of districts with disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in special education and related services that is the result of inappropriate identification. And so because that phrase wasn't included in number 3, I assume that's what you're getting at, but can we kind of talk about, like, is the goal to make sure that we're not inappropriately identifying non-white students, or are we trying to decrease the numbers?
So the goal is to not
Dr. Mathis,
inappropriate.
I'm sorry, just
Go ahead.
for the reference for the board, we're talking about the last page of that presentation, if anyone was looking for it. You're welcome.
Thank you. So there is an incidence rates by race ethnicity chart that you'll see in the report. What that is referencing is if you look at the total district enrollment and the percentage of students who are not white in that first bar, you'll see, like, by color representation what each race is listed, okay? So then if you look at the IEP count bar next to that, you'll see that some of those colors don't necessarily align. And in theory, you would be identifying commensurately with that same percentage. Okay, so when we look at the number of students who are identified for special education, we want to make sure we're using culturally relevant assessment practices. We want to make sure we're reviewing our tools and our practices and processes through the referral process to make sure those are consistent and that we are ensuring that they have full access to general education. We're ruling out exclusionary factors because it is a really big deal to say that someone's identified as having a disability. So they have to meet that criteria that was shared also in the responses. It showed the different eligibility areas. And there are certain areas that we have received information from DESE saying, you know, it looks like your percentage of students who are identified, who are, I'll use the example, students who are Black, who are identified in this particular eligibility category is higher than the percentage of your population of students who are Black. So you need to monitor that. And so that's what we look at, is that monitoring. We're constantly reviewing data, monitoring our practices, and then ensuring that we provide tools and resources to our staff so that they can ensure that we are providing appropriate education before we would get to a reason to suspect a disability. That's what that is about, is this is the long list that I sent of several indicators that DESE monitors for us. And so they give us a whole profile report that is publicly available on DESE, but then we also get one that is just customized for us. And then there are certain things that they may follow up and want to monitor more closely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So it's hard, I'm looking at this bar graph that you included, and the percent number isn't there, so it's really just based off of, you know, eyeballing. So I guess my question is, because I'm ignorant of what DESE is requiring in terms of this, and I know there's a lot of rules and regulations. So what is the threshold? What's that percentage threshold where if you are over X percent over how many students in this category you have in total population? Like, say we have 10% Hispanic students in our district, and yet we have 12% who are 12% identified total out of our IEPs. Do you get what I'm saying? So what's that threshold? Is it 2% over? Is it 5%? And maybe I'm asking a question you don't know the answer to.
That's okay. No, can I say it's complicated?
Yes,
yes. So I will be happy to share with you the full special education profile data. This is where that graph was created from. It says, here's our total percentage of students in the district. Here's the total district enrollment. Here's the total IEP count. And then it goes through these specific areas, like they target intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, specific learning disabilities, other health impairments, autism, and speech language impairment. That's not the whole list. They target those specifically, and then they compare what is the total district number percentage by race, and then what is that total IEP count by race, K through 12, and then in each of those categories, what is the percentage of students who are identified in that particular area? When it is a larger percentage than what the total enrollment is, like, for example, total IEP count for students who are Black is 21.2%, but the total district enrollment, K-12, is 13.4%. They're saying, take a look at that, see if you need to review your practices. It doesn't mean they're saying we're wrong about eligibility. It doesn't mean that we're saying we're wrong, but it means we need to monitor that.
So percentage-wise, they don't have a threshold. It's just if it's over your total enrollment percentage and it's not the same, then it's kind of flagging it. Is that
They
kind of?
do have some specifics in terms of what means disproportionate. I would say this is discrepant data.
I mean,
and
that's 9%
disproportionality
difference, so,
comes with additional things like here's a letter that's a warning that you're disproportionate in this area, and we've received those before. We had one particular eligibility area we needed to look at. We reviewed that data that they reported, and we were able to update with information that we were not on the list for the warning at that point.
So since the criteria really is that it's inappropriate identification, since Desi had notified our district that, you know, certain areas were out of our percentage, do you feel like there's a problem with appropriate identification? Since that's kind of the clarifier, right? Like, you're not in trouble as long as what you're doing isn't inappropriately identifying these students who need support.
Correct. They also have a tiered monitoring process where they do file reviews. We've just gone through the self-assessment process where we submitted files that we thought were our best of the best and then receive feedback on those, and then they determine, do you need an on-site review, or here's your score for that. But they look at things like this as part of that process, and if they were starting to see a trend or a problem that looked atypical in comparison to other districts in the state, they may want to dig into that a little bit further. But in terms of best practice, I always want to make sure that our staff feel equipped not to feel like they are over-identifying or under-identifying in any population.
Absolutely. One more question. Thank you for answering all my
Sure.
questions. I don't think we break it down, at least in some of these graphs that I've seen so far, by free and reduced lunch. Do we look at that subgroup or group of population in terms of the identification with IEPs, or no?
It is not part of our typical practice to break that down within the special services evaluation of data. When we review those things, that's not part of our typical practice. I think we could find some correlation data if that was requested.
Thanks, appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Is there any other questions for Dr. Mathis? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Anything else in 9? I don't want to, okay.
Nope, we're good.
10.01, public comments, and I do not believe anyone signed up for public comments.
No? All right, so thank everyone for joining us for our meeting. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.